Noah Pressgrove was a vibrant, young man with a zest for life. Born in Oklahoma on May 14, 2004, Noah grew up in the small town of Comanche, surrounded by his loving family and close-knit community. Despite his young age, Noah had already accomplished so much, excelling in various sports like soccer, baseball, football, wrestling, track, and cross-country. Noah was known for his infectious personality, always making people laugh with his pranks and jokes. He was a true country boy, fearless and spontaneous, who loved the outdoors and spending time with his loved ones. Noah's charisma drew people to him, and he had a special way of making everyone feel welcomed and happy. At the age of 17, Noah emancipated himself and moved in with his grandmother, whom he adored. He took on the role of caretaker, ensuring that his grandmother and great-grandmother were well taken care of. Noah's selflessness and dedication to his family were a testament to his kind heart and strong character. On September 4, 2023, Noah's lifeless body was discovered naked on the side of a rural road in the early morning hours. The circumstances surrounding his death were suspicious, and authorities have not yet announced any persons of interest or suspects. Noah's family and community are devastated by his untimely passing, and they are determined to find justice for him. The rumor mill has been running rampant due to the limited information released by authorities, and the family has been relying on social media posts, news outlets, and expert opinions to piece together what happened. Noah Pressgrove was a young man with a bright future ahead of him. After graduating from high school in May 2023, he was unsure about his career path and decided to take a year off to figure things out. He considered becoming a welder and even had his heart set on joining the military, planning to enlist with a family member in 2024. Noah's life took a tragic turn on Labor Day weekend of 2023. He had originally planned to attend the Rocklahoma Music Festival with his aunt and uncle, but decided to bring a younger friend along. When his aunt refused to take responsibility for the underage friend, Noah made other plans. On Friday night, Noah attended a local high school football game with family and friends. There, he learned about a party being hosted by a 22-year-old friend in Terrell, Oklahoma. The party was heavily documented on social media, showing typical college party activities. In the early morning hours of Monday, September 4th, Noah's life was stolen from him. At around 5:53 a.m., a semi-truck driver noticed what appeared to be a person lying on the southbound shoulder of US 81 in Jefferson County, about a mile north of the party location. The driver went to Terrell to turn around and confirm what he had seen. When the driver returned to the area, there were at least 2 white vehicles present, including a white service truck. Tragically, the driver had indeed seen a person in the road, the naked and mangled body of 19-year-old Noah Pressgrove. 911 was called immediately, and the local volunteer fire department and Jefferson County Sheriff's Department arrived on the scene. It wasn't until around 7 a.m. that Noah's family was finally notified of the accident. His brother, Dallin, thought Noah was just badly hurt and potentially being taken to the hospital. When they arrived at the scene, they were met with the shocking reality that they had lost their loved one. Noah's body was found lying on the southbound shoulder of the road, facing away from the road in the fetal position. He was completely naked, except for 2 different shoes, one Adidas that belonged to him and a gray Hey Dude slip-on shoe that didn't belong to him. A pair of white shorts was neatly folded on the ground just a few feet from his body. When Noah's body was discovered, it was surrounded by strange and disturbing clues. Among the items found were 3 broken pieces of a white chain he often wore, scattered teeth, and clumps of hair. One piece of hair was even found on the road, while another was stuck to his body. On one of his legs was a drawing of a stick figure, and his body showed signs of severe damage. As investigators arrived at the scene, they couldn't help but wonder what had happened. It didn't look like a typical hit-and-run. His pants were folded neatly nearby, and his tooth was found in a circle close to his body. The placement of everything felt odd, leading them to question the initial assessment that it was a simple accident. The Jefferson County Sheriff's Department initially believed it was a hit-and-run, but Noah's family felt differently. They were confused about how he ended up in such a condition, a mile away from the party he had attended. Why was he naked? Why were his shorts folded beside him? And why was he wearing mismatched shoes, one of which didn't belong to him? There were no tire marks or debris on the road to suggest a car had hit him. The only blood found was on the sheet covering Noah's body in a small pool beneath his head. There was no sign that he had been thrown across the road, which would have been expected after a serious impact. Everything, including his belongings, was too close to his body, leading his family to believe something more sinister had occurred. When the Oklahoma Highway Patrol took over the investigation, they quickly noticed the suspicious state of the scene and Noah's body. They began to question what had really happened that weekend. The autopsy results would reveal even more horrifying details. Noah's skull appeared crushed, and he had bruises all over his upper body. His fingertips were nearly shredded, indicating extreme violence. Noah had not driven to the party, so he would have relied on someone else for a ride. However, the investigation faced challenges due to the initial lack of thoroughness and the reluctance of witnesses to come forward. The sheriff's department had made a hasty conclusion about the case, unaware of the party that Noah had attended. As Noah's family sought answers, they felt frustrated by the investigation's slow progress. They wanted to know who was the last person to see him and how he ended up with such horrific injuries. The lack of a proper investigation at the start raised concerns, and they were determined to ensure Noah's story was not forgotten. The family knew that someone out there had answers and that they needed to keep pushing for justice. Noah's tragic death left a deep impact on his community, and they rallied together to support his family in their quest for the truth. The investigation was far from over, and everyone hoped that one day, they would uncover what truly happened to Noah Presgrove that fateful weekend. As the investigation into Noah Presgrove's death progressed, it became clear that several missteps had been made in the initial handling of the case. Noah's family accused the authorities of failing to properly secure the crime scene, allowing evidence to be moved, and permitting people to remain on the scene who should have been questioned. Despite Noah being last seen at a party just down the road from where his body was found, the house was never searched. By the time the Oklahoma Highway Patrol and OSBI took over the case, they were told they lacked the legal grounds to obtain a warrant for the property. This was incredibly frustrating for Noah's family, who felt that not checking the last known location was a critical oversight. The only items of Noah's that were recovered from the party were his 2 phones. His shirt, shorts, wallet, and other shoe were unaccounted for and mysteriously vanished. Noah's family believed these items could have provided valuable clues about what happened to him, especially his wallet, which may have indicated if this was a robbery gone wrong. Knowing that the entire weekend had been heavily documented on social media, Noah's family tried to collect whatever information they could from people's stories and Snapchats. They hoped it might show if Noah had been with someone he barely knew, if there had been a fight, or if he could be seen wandering off in the background. However, according to the family, when they went to look, everyone had allegedly deleted their posts from around the time Noah's body was found. Party attendees denied this claim. The OSBI declared Noah's death suspicious and said they were waiting for the medical examiner's office to determine the cause of death. Noah's aunt expressed frustration at the lack of information being released due to the ongoing investigation. The recent high school graduate had planned to join the military, and his family spoke about his passion for sports and the love he had from the community. They pleaded for anyone with information to come forward and help bring them closure. Authorities interviewed around 40 people who had been at the party that weekend, but no one seemed to have any insight into what happened to Noah. Many claimed they were asleep, still partying, too intoxicated, or simply didn't see or hear anything. Noah's best friend's girlfriend even told authorities she didn't know him, which devastated his family. The only consistent information the partygoers provided was that Noah had been in a rollover ATV accident in the early morning hours of Monday, September 4th. They claimed he walked away unharmed and was checked out by a nurse at the party. Shortly after, they said Noah got into an argument with someone they believed was his girlfriend, causing him to walk out of the house, after which no one saw him alive again. Noah's family was left grappling with his brutal death while having zero answers. They wondered if the ATV accident was more serious than reported or if Noah had suffered a traumatic brain injury that led to his demise. The inconsistencies in the stories and the lack of concrete evidence made it challenging for authorities to piece together what truly happened to Noah Presgrove that fateful weekend. As time passed after Noah's tragic death, his family was left grappling with unanswered questions and unsettling rumors. They wondered if he had gotten into an argument and walked down the road, only to collapse and be hit by a car. Or perhaps something more sinister had occurred. The silence from his friends was deafening. They had hoped for answers or even condolences, but instead, it felt like a wall of silence had descended. Noah's family learned from one of his friends that they had been told by a parent to avoid speaking to them. This revelation was infuriating, as the very people who might have answers were being instructed to stay away. It was heartbreaking for Noah's family to think that the last people who saw their loved one were not coming forward with even the simplest information. 2 months after Noah's death, investigators finally ruled out the possibility of a pedestrian versus vehicle collision. Court filings revealed that they believed Noah had been forcibly pushed from the bed of a moving truck, a significant shift in the narrative. Noah's sister described him as a kind and gentle person who had no enemies, adding to the mystery of who could have harmed him. This new theory raised questions about whether someone at the party harbored resentment toward Noah or if a stranger had found him wandering on the road. If he had been pushed from a moving truck, it implied that at least 2 people were involved, the driver and the person who did the pushing. Yet, despite this announcement, the investigation was still in its early stages, and many questions remained unanswered. Noah's family worked tirelessly to piece together the events of that weekend. They confirmed that he attended the party on Saturday, returned home to shower, and then went back out on Sunday with a friend. However, conflicting stories emerged about what happened next. Some rumors suggested he was taken to a different town, while others claimed he was given rides by several different people. The confusion was maddening, and it felt like vital information was slipping through their fingers. Whispers circulated that Noah had been involved in arguments over the weekend, including one with his best friend, Jack. Jack was one of the first to arrive at the scene when Noah's body was found. Allegedly, Noah and Jack's girlfriend had been talking privately at the party, leading to a verbal argument between Noah and Jack. They eventually made up, but the tension lingered. As Noah's family continued to seek answers, they faced the frustration of inconsistent accounts and a lack of cooperation from those who were present at the party. The investigation seemed to stall, and the absence of the autopsy results only added to their anguish. They needed to know what had happened to Noah, who had been surrounded by friends who now seemed unwilling to help. The family remained hopeful that the truth would eventually come to light. They believed that someone out there had the answers they were desperately seeking. Noah's memory deserved justice, and his loved ones were determined to find out what truly happened that fateful weekend. As the weekend progressed, tensions escalated at the party where Noah had been. A second argument broke out when a guy accused Noah of stealing and hiding his phone. Known for his playful pranks, Noah didn't take the accusation lightly. The argument became physical when the other guy fish-hooked Noah in the mouth, prompting Noah to bite his finger in response. How the situation was resolved remains unclear, but the accused phone was eventually found under someone sleeping on the couch, leaving questions about whether it was a misunderstanding or if there was still lingering tension. Around 3 a.m., the partygoers claimed Noah decided to take an ATV belonging to his best friend, Jack. According to reports, Noah snuck into the room where Jack and his girlfriend were sleeping to grab the keys. He then took the ATV for a ride with 4 to 5 other guys. They were having fun until the ATV rolled over. Noah's family was understandably concerned about the possibility that the ATV accident could have caused more harm than reported. They wanted to know if the ATV had been checked for damage. Jack's father stated that authorities had examined the vehicle and found no significant damage, returning it shortly after. Following the ATV incident, partygoers claimed Noah was unharmed but covered in dirt and heavily intoxicated. To help him clean up, they decided to put him in the shower. However, accounts of this event varied widely. Some said Noah was coherent and joking around, while others claimed he was unresponsive. The number of people who helped him shower also differed, with some saying it was 2 guys, while others said it was girls. After he was cleaned up, Noah was dressed in a pair of Jack's white shorts, which are believed to be the same ones found near his body later. After getting dressed, Noah got into an argument with a girl at the party, described in some sources as his girlfriend, but his family clarified that she was actually the birthday girl hosting the party. The nature of their argument varies in retellings. One version suggests Noah tried to sleep in her bed after showering, but she insisted he sleep on the floor, which angered him. Another version claims she made advances toward Noah, which he rejected, leading to a confrontation. Regardless of the specifics, everyone agrees that Noah left the house around 3:15 to 3:30 a.m., just a few hours before his body was found. A Snapchat post from a partygoer at 3:41 a.m. showed her smiling with the caption, "Well, Noah is missing." This revelation upset many, as it raised the question, if they knew Noah was missing, why wasn't anyone looking for him? Noah had no car and was relying on friends for a ride home, making the lack of concern from those at the party feel particularly callous. His family was devastated, feeling that the people who were supposed to be his friends were not taking the situation seriously. The mystery surrounding Noah's final hours deepened, leaving his family desperate for answers and justice. They knew something was wrong and were determined to uncover the truth about what happened that night. After facing significant backlash, the birthday girl finally spoke out, claiming that no one realized the seriousness of the situation when Noah walked away. She explained that it was common for him to take a moment to cool off after getting heated during a party, so no one expected him not to return. As this information came to light, some previously deleted social media posts began to resurface. Noah's family learned that several people had taken screenshots or screen recordings of videos and pictures from the party. However, these clips didn't provide much insight into what happened to Noah. Most showed everyone having a good time, playing games, and being carefree. One concerning video captured the birthday girl and her sister arguing on the porch about Noah's disappearance. This indicated that people were aware he was missing and that it was causing some level of concern. Yet, despite this knowledge, no one seemed to actively search for him. Eventually, it was revealed that a few partygoers did attempt to look for Noah. They took an ATV and drove up the road where his body would later be found, but they reported not seeing anything. After their search yielded no results, they returned to the party, assuming Noah would come back on his own. This lack of urgency was baffling to Noah's family. They had seen how much care was given to him after the ATV accident, with friends bathing and dressing him, yet that concern seemed to evaporate when he walked off into the night. While no one was accused of wrongdoing, the series of poor decisions left a heavy weight on the investigation. Authorities eventually obtained warrants for several phones from the partygoers in hopes of recovering helpful information. While the police indicated that they found some useful details, they did not disclose what those were. As the investigation continued, Noah's family faced the painful task of saying goodbye. Friends and family gathered at the Comanche High School gym for his funeral, which drew a massive turnout from the community. Many wore shirts and jerseys in his honor, lining up to pay their respects to a beloved member of their town. Noah was remembered as a kind-hearted kid and an exceptional athlete, someone who would have made a positive impact on the world. The parking lot was filled with mourners, some of whom were total strangers, united in their grief for a life taken too soon. In the wake of this tragedy, Noah's family decided to create the Noah Pressgrove Scholarship, aimed at supporting a senior from Comanche High School. This initiative was a way for them to honor Noah's memory and ensure that something good would come from their loss. They were determined to keep fighting for answers and justice, just as Noah would have wanted. As the investigation into Noah Pressgrove's death continued, his family uncovered significant information regarding two phones that left the party house and traveled to the area where Noah was found. These phones then returned to the house, raising crucial questions about the timeline of events. Were these phones used by partygoers who claimed to have searched for Noah? Or did this indicate something more sinister about what happened to him? The lack of clarity left Noah's family with many unanswered questions. The case began to gain national attention, particularly after News Nation reported on it extensively. Their coverage brought renewed focus to Noah's story, which had been largely ignored by the media for months. Despite the ongoing investigation, Noah's family had been struggling to obtain the autopsy report, which had not been released for 8 or 9 months. Typically, such reports are withheld in criminal cases, but the family was desperate for answers. When News Nation directly contacted the medical examiner's office, the autopsy report was suddenly made available. The findings were shocking and detailed, revealing a long list of severe injuries that Noah had sustained. Noah's autopsy report detailed extensive injuries, including abrasions all over his face and neck, multiple broken teeth and lacerations in his mouth, suggesting he had been struck hard enough to bite down on his tongue and lip, hemorrhaging in various areas of his skull, along with several skull fractures, including a hinge fracture that requires significant force, a cracked base of the skull, which was described as being split into 2, severe trauma to his brain, with swelling and lacerations in 4 distinct areas, fractures in his cervical vertebrae, C1, C2, C6, and C7, with the C1 vertebra being displaced, a type of injury often seen in hanging cases, bilateral rib fractures and scapular fractures, which are rare and typically associated with severe trauma such as car accidents or falls. Despite the extensive damage to his upper body, Noah's lower body showed minimal injuries, which further complicated the theory that he had been involved in a hit-and-run accident. The severity of Noah's injuries underscored the urgency for justice. His family was determined to find out what happened to him, believing that someone out there held the key to the truth. They felt the weight of the unanswered questions pressing down on them, knowing that every day without answers was a day filled with heartache. As the investigation progressed, the Texas Rangers became involved, successfully obtaining a geofencing warrant around the area where Noah was found and the party house. This warrant allowed investigators to track any phones that entered that area during a specific time frame, potentially providing crucial evidence in the case. Noah's family remained hopeful that the renewed media attention and the involvement of law enforcement would lead to answers. They continued to advocate for justice, determined to honor Noah's memory and ensure that his story would not be forgotten. The community rallied around them, supporting their efforts to seek the truth about what happened to Noah on that tragic night. As the investigation into Noah Priest-Grove's tragic death continued, the family found themselves navigating a complex web of rumors and speculation. They spent countless hours sifting through discussions on social media, trying to discern fact from fiction. This process was overwhelming, and it highlighted the challenges faced by those seeking the truth amid a flood of misinformation. Noah's family, including his aunt, brother, sister, and cousin, remained active in their pursuit of justice. They utilized platforms like Facebook to share information and gather support from the community. With 3 private investigators now working on the case, and the FBI collaborating with local law enforcement, there was a renewed sense of hope that answers would soon emerge. A witness from the party claimed he saw Noah wearing black shorts when he arrived at the scene, despite Noah being found naked with white shorts nearby. This discrepancy raised questions about the reliability of his account. Furthermore, Jack, Noah's best friend, had reportedly announced Noah's death at 5:15 a.m., which conflicted with the timeline of events. Jack had texted his father around the same time, asking for a hat for their fishing trip, suggesting he was unaware of Noah's death. The witnesses claimed that Jack knew about Noah's death before the truck driver arrived, created additional confusion. If Jack had indeed woken up at 5:15 a.m. and alerted others, it would imply he had knowledge of the situation well before authorities were involved. This inconsistency led to speculation about the accuracy of the witnesses' timing and the events that transpired that morning. Adding to the narrative, the truck driver who discovered Noah's body came forward to share his account. He stated that he was the first on the scene and confirmed Noah was found naked, asserting that no one had tampered with the body. His testimony was crucial, as it provided a clearer picture of the moments following Noah's discovery. The truck driver's insistence that he was the only one present at the time added weight to the investigation, but it also raised further questions about what had happened to Noah before he was found. The community remained engaged, hoping that the combination of witness accounts and ongoing investigations would eventually lead to clarity. Despite the chaos and confusion surrounding the case, Noah's family continued to advocate for justice. They expressed gratitude to those who came forward with information, believing that every detail could help piece together what happened on that fateful night. The family remained hopeful that the renewed focus on the case would encourage others with information to step forward. As the investigation unfolded, the community rallied around Noah's family, supporting their quest for truth and justice. They organized fundraisers and awareness campaigns to keep Noah's story alive, emphasizing the importance of finding answers. The fight for justice was far from over, and the family was determined to ensure that Noah's memory would not be forgotten. Clara was born on a chilly winter day, January 30th, 1977, under the sign of Aquarius. She grew up in the quaint city of Brno, nestled in the heart of the Czech Republic. The streets of Brno were filled with laughter and the warmth of family, and Clara's childhood was no different. She lived with her loving parents and two older sisters, Gabrielle and Katerina. Katerina, the eldest, was born on August 7, 1973, making her a fiery Leo. The three sisters shared a strong bond, often going on adventures together. They would take day trips to nearby parks or explore the wonders of their city during summer vacations. Clara was known for her energetic spirit. She loved sports and was always running around outside. Katerina, on the other hand, found joy in nature and spent hours lost in books about far-off lands and exciting tales. Religion played a significant role in their lives. The family attended church every Sunday without fail. The girls went to Sunday school where they learned about kindness and the importance of following the 10 Commandments. As they grew older, Clara and Katerina's interest in their religion deepened, almost to an extreme level. They began to believe they were special, chosen by God for a divine purpose. Clara often spoke about her beliefs with great passion. She was convinced she had been given extraordinary powers and that she was meant to accomplish something monumental. One day, in a moment of misguided zeal, Clara tried to suffocate Katerina with a pillow, believing she could bring her sister back to life. Thankfully, their parents intervened just in time to prevent any harm. As the girls continued their education, their unusual beliefs became more evident. They would tell their teachers about their divine visions and how they were destined for greatness. This raised alarm bells among adults who began to worry about their mental health. Social workers suspected that Clara and Katerina might be experiencing delusions or even signs of schizophrenia. They reached out to their mother, suggesting that the girls needed professional help. However, Clara and Katerina's mother dismissed these concerns outright. Instead of seeking help, she decided to pull her daughters out of school and transfer them elsewhere, hoping that a change of scenery would solve their problems. Unfortunately, without any treatment or guidance, Clara and Katerina's condition only worsened. Fast forward to the mid-1990s, Clara was now 18 years old. Strangely enough, she had become distant from her family. The once close sisters no longer spoke. Clara had cut ties with everyone she once loved. During this time, she met a man named Radek. Their relationship blossomed quickly. They fell in love and married within months. Before long, Clara became a mother herself. At just 20 years old, she welcomed her first son, Jacob, into the world. 2 years later came another boy named Andre. In those early days of motherhood, life seemed perfect for Clara and Radek. They settled into a cozy apartment where laughter echoed off the walls as their little boys played. Clara decided to pursue her education further by enrolling at university to study economics while balancing her new role as a mother. She managed to find a job as a secretary after graduating, a job that brought her satisfaction as she juggled work and family life. For a while, everything seemed just right in Clara's world. However, beneath the surface of this seemingly happy family lay shadows from her past that would soon resurface in unexpected ways. Clara's life was like a roller coaster, filled with ups and downs that seemed to spiral out of control. By the time she turned 26, it became clear that her struggles were far from over. The whispers in her mind grew louder, and she began to experience delusions again. Clara was convinced that she was on a divine mission from God, destined to achieve something monumental. Unfortunately, she started to believe that her marriage and her children were nothing but distractions from this important mission. Clara would often argue with her husband, Radek, telling him he was standing in the way of her destiny. Their home, once filled with laughter and love, turned into a battleground of heated arguments. Radek, overwhelmed by the constant conflict and unable to cope with Clara's delusions, finally decided he had enough and filed for divorce. At this point in the story, one might expect Clara to give up her children, letting them go with their father since she had labeled them as distractions. But Clara surprised everyone. She took her 2 boys and left Radek behind. In a sudden twist of fate, she reconnected with her sister Katerina after years of silence. This reunion marked the beginning of a new chapter, but it was one that would lead to chaos. Clara and Katerina moved into an apartment together with Clara's young children. At first, everything seemed perfect. Clara was a devoted mother, and Katerina took on the role of a loving aunt. The 2 boys, Jacob and Andre, thrived in this environment. Jacob was a lively child who loved basketball and dinosaurs. He even played the flute. Andre was equally energetic, enjoying hockey and spending time outdoors. Katerina worked as a manager at a local day center where she cared for many young children. Shortly after they settled in together, she helped Clara find a job at the same center. The sisters worked side by side while raising their boys together, creating a close-knit family that appeared happy and fulfilled. However, as time passed, Clara's mental health began to decline again. It became evident that her untreated schizophrenia was taking over her life. The voices in her head grew more persistent, pulling her deeper into confusion and delusion. Around the same time, Katerina introduced Clara to a new girl at the day center, a 13-year-old named Anishka, who went by Anna. Anna had come from Norway and had faced unimaginable hardships throughout her life. Her past was filled with sorrow. Both of her parents had died when she was very young. After losing them, Anna bounced between orphanages where she suffered terrible abuse. Things took an even darker turn when Anna fell into the hands of a pedophile ring where she endured horrific experiences of sexual abuse and torture. Tragically, Anna was forced to participate in the abuse of other children as well during this time. But Anna's story didn't end there. After enduring such trauma, she managed to escape from the clutches of the ring and found herself in safety. With help from an unknown doctor who specialized in treating children with traumatic pasts, Anna began her journey toward healing. However, just as hope began to shine for Anna, another shadow loomed over her future. She was diagnosed with leukemia. The doctors delivered heartbreaking news. It was unlikely that Anna would live past the age of 16. Desperate for a loving home, Anna longed to be adopted. When she arrived at the daycare center where Katerina worked as the manager, Katerina immediately felt a surge of compassion for the troubled girl. Recognizing Anna's need for care and support, Katerina approached her sister Clara with an idea. "Clara," she said gently, "this girl needs someone to look after her. Would you consider adopting Anna?" Clara's heart broke as she listened to Anna's harrowing story. Without hesitation, she agreed to adopt Anna, wanting to provide her with the love and stability she so desperately needed. And so began the formal process of adoption. By September 2005, Anna officially moved in with Clara, Katerina, and Clara's 2 boys, Jacob and Andre. Their family now consisted of 5 members: Clara, Katerina, Jacob, Andre, and Anna. It was a new beginning for Anna, who was starting chemotherapy treatment for her leukemia. However, there was something strange about how things were unfolding. Despite being Anna's legal guardian, Clara was never allowed to take her to the hospital for treatments. Instead, it was always Katerina who accompanied Anna to her appointments. This raised eyebrows. Why was Clara excluded from such an important part of Anna's care? Adding to the mystery was the doctor treating Anna. This doctor communicated only through text messages. Clara and the doctor never met face to face. It seemed odd that a medical professional would rely solely on texts to guide a guardian in caring for a sick child. The messages from this mysterious doctor became increasingly unsettling. He instructed Clara on how to treat Anna's emotional wounds from her traumatic past, suggesting that Anna needed an abundance of love and praise. Clara was told to shower Anna with compliments every day and buy her gifts almost daily. But it didn't stop there. The doctor's instructions took a bizarre turn. He demanded that Clara give Anna full-body massages every night as part of her treatment. These massages were not only extensive but also included intimate areas of Anna's body. It was shocking that Clara agreed to follow such disturbing advice. As time went on, these massages could last up to 8 hours. Friends of Clara began noticing strange behavior from Anna. She often stared blankly at the floor and avoided eye contact with others. Despite being perfectly capable of walking, Anna insisted that Clara carry her everywhere. Anna's behavior became increasingly demanding. If she didn't get what she wanted, she would throw tantrums that escalated quickly. There were moments when she threatened to harm herself, once holding a knife while threatening to jump out of a window and another time nearly jumping in front of an oncoming train. Adding tension to the household dynamics was Anna's growing animosity towards Jacob and Andre, who were just children themselves at 8 and 6 years old. Despite their innocence and kindness towards her, Anna claimed they were bullying her simply because they received attention from Clara. Incredibly, Clara began siding with Anna against her own children. This shift in loyalty left everyone confused and hurt. It didn't make sense that a mother would turn against her own boys in favor of a girl who had just entered their lives. Clara's life took a dark turn as she became increasingly obsessed with Anna, the girl who had just entered her life. It was bewildering to everyone around her. Why was she so devoted to this mysterious 13-year-old girl? Clara began to neglect her own children, Jacob and Andre, pouring all her energy and attention into Anna. As Clara focused on Anna, she started to let herself go. She stopped eating properly, neglected her hygiene, and lost a significant amount of weight. Her once vibrant appearance faded, leaving her looking disheveled and worn out. Sleep eluded her. She was only getting about 3 hours a night. Clara withdrew from friends and family, becoming a mere shadow of her former self, all because of Anna. There was something unsettling about Anna as well. While she displayed childish behavior, throwing tantrums like a typical teenager, there were moments when she would switch to being cold and calculating. Her demeanor could shift in an instant, revealing a manipulative side that seemed far beyond her years. When Anna doodled, the drawings often reflected themes that felt too mature for someone her age. People noticed that her eyes held an unsettling depth. They seemed to tell stories of experiences far beyond what a 13-year-old should have faced. What no one realized at the time was that Anna was not who she claimed to be. In a shocking twist, it was revealed that Anna was actually a 33-year-old woman named Barbara Skrylova. Yes, you heard that right. Anna was not a child at all but an adult posing as one in a desperate attempt to be adopted by Clara. How could this deception go unnoticed? It felt like something out of a movie, a chilling reality that echoed the plot of Orphan, where an adult woman masquerades as a child and wreaks havoc on a family. To understand how Barbara ended up in this situation, we need to delve into her past. Born on July 20th, 1974, Barbara grew up in the Czech Republic in an environment filled with neglect. Her mother struggled with alcoholism, while her father was largely absent throughout her childhood. This lack of care left Barbara feeling alone and unwanted. As she entered her teenage years, Barbara's mental health began to deteriorate. She exhibited signs of various mental health conditions, including dissociative personality disorder and schizophrenia. Additionally, she suffered from hypopituitarism, a rare medical condition affecting the pituitary gland's ability to produce growth hormones. This condition stunted Barbara's growth, allowing her to maintain a childlike appearance well into adulthood. These factors combined created a perfect storm for deception. Barbara learned how to manipulate those around her by bending the truth and creating false identities. She had previously escaped from psychiatric facilities and had even convinced families that she was an orphan in need of care. This pattern of lies became a way for her to navigate through life. Now, as Clara continued to spiral deeper into obsession with Anna, unaware that this girl was actually a woman with a troubled past, the stage was set for chaos to unfold within their home. The dynamics between Clara's children and Anna became increasingly strained, leading to bizarre behaviors and dangerous situations that would soon come to light. As Barbara transitioned into her teenage years and eventually adulthood, she continued to look much younger than her actual age. This childlike appearance led adults to treat her as if she were still a child, which filled Barbara with frustration. She resented being seen as helpless and decided to turn her condition into a tool for revenge against those who underestimated her. Barbara learned to act like a child, using this facade to manipulate the adults around her. Because she was an adult, she possessed skills that allowed her to deceive people more effectively than a typical child could. She would charm adults into believing she was a vulnerable girl in need of care, and they would welcome her into their homes, offering food, money, and attention. It was a twisted game for Barbara, who thrived on the attention she received. But even with all the manipulation, Barbara felt it wasn't enough. In her later teenage years, she concocted an elaborate story to trick a family into thinking she was a young orphan in need of adoption. This family took her in and began the adoption process, mirroring the very scheme she was currently executing with Clara. However, the truth eventually came out, and they discovered that Barbara was not a child at all. As a result, the adoption fell through. When her deception was uncovered, Barbara was committed to a psychiatric facility for treatment. But this did not deter her. She managed to escape and soon tried the same trick again. She approached another family with her sob story about being an orphan in need of love and care. Once again, they believed her and began the adoption process. It was astonishing that Barbara had successfully pulled off this ruse multiple times. However, just like before, it wasn't long before the truth came out. This time, Barbara's own parents and authorities stepped in and had her committed again to a psychiatric facility for further treatment. She would spend several years there until her late 20s when doctors finally deemed her fit for release. By 2003 or 2004, as Barbara approached 30 years old, she enrolled at university to study music and performing arts. During this time, she crossed paths with Katerina, Clara's sister, who played an important role in Barbara's life. Katerina was only a few years younger than Barbara, and they quickly formed a friendship. Katerina worked as a manager at a daycare center, and soon after meeting Katerina, Barbara also got a job at the same center. It's important to note that Barbara started working there before Clara arrived on the scene. Clara would only meet Barbara later when she was posing as Anna. At first glance, everything seemed normal at the daycare center. But inside Barbara's mind brewed a desire to reclaim the attention she craved by acting like a child once more. She knew from past experiences that children naturally received more affection from adults, a fact that fueled her obsession with being seen as one of them. Determined not to get caught this time around, Barbara devised a plan and confided in Katerina about her intentions. "Hey," she said casually one day, "we're friends, right? Can you help me change my identity? I want to become a child again." Most people would have been taken aback by such an unusual request and would likely refuse to help. But Katerina surprised everyone by agreeing to assist Barbara in this bizarre endeavor. As Barbara began to disappear from her job at the daycare center, her colleagues were left puzzled about her sudden absence. In secret, she and Katerina worked together to transform Barbara into a more childlike version of herself. The lengths she went to were extreme. Barbara starved herself, losing over half her body weight in a desperate attempt to appear younger. She changed her wardrobe, opting for bright colors and cartoon-themed clothing that would make her look like a child. To further enhance her appearance, Barbara underwent breast reduction surgery and liposuction. After months of recovery from these surgeries, she was ready to re-enter society, now presenting herself as a 13-year-old girl named Anishka. The original plan was for Anishka to simply blend in at the daycare center as another child. However, Barbara had grander ambitions. She wanted to be adopted. Katerina suggested that Clara, her sister, would be the perfect person to adopt Anishka. This was around the time Clara started working at the daycare center, and it was then that Katerina and Barbara concocted a fake backstory for Anishka. They fabricated a tale of tragedy, claiming that Anishka's parents had died, that she had suffered abuse in orphanages, and even that she had been sold into a pedophile ring. They included the detail that Anishka was battling cancer to elicit sympathy from Clara. This entire backstory was a lie designed to make Clara feel sorry for Anishka and push her towards adoption. Because of this deception, Clara was never allowed to take Anna for any cancer treatments, because Anna didn't actually have cancer at all. Instead, after these supposed treatments, Anna would return home wrapped in a blanket with tubes attached to her body, creating the illusion of someone recovering from chemotherapy. The mysterious doctor who had been sending Clara text messages with instructions on how to care for Anna remained an enigma. Speculation arose that this doctor could have been Barbara herself or even Katerina, but it was unclear who was truly behind this facade. The instructions became increasingly bizarre. Clara was told to give Anna full-body massages every night, including intimate areas, under the guise of helping her recover from trauma. The motivations behind all this manipulation are complex. For Barbara, it seemed that the need for attention drove her actions. Perhaps stemming from childhood neglect, she sought out parental figures through adoption schemes. But what did Katerina gain from helping Barbara? That question remained unanswered. Despite the glaring inconsistencies in Anna's story, such as how someone who looked like an adult could be mistaken for a child, Clara appeared oblivious to the truth. It's perplexing how she could accept Anna's identity without question, especially given Barbara's adult features that often gave away her true age. By the summer of 2006, Anna had been living with Clara and Katerina for about a year. The ruse of Anna being a 13-year-old girl had been successfully maintained during this time. However, Clara was now navigating the complex legal process of adopting Anna, a process complicated by the fact that Anna wasn't a real person. To bypass legal hurdles, Katerina and Barbara needed to create fake identification documents since Anna lacked any official records like a birth certificate or passport. This deceitful act only deepened the web of lies they were weaving. As they continued their charade, it became clear that this case was spiraling into something far more sinister than anyone could have anticipated. To complete the elaborate scheme, Barbara and Katerina knew they needed to create fake medical records that would support Anna's fabricated cancer diagnosis. Somehow, they managed to pull this off, crafting documents that would convince anyone who saw them. Finally, Anna had to undergo a medical examination to verify her age. While it's unclear if this was a standard procedure for adoption, it became a crucial step in their plan. You might think this was the moment when Barbara would be caught, given that she was actually 33 years old and not 13. But Katerina had a clever plan. She had a friend with a 13-year-old daughter and convinced her to let them borrow her child for the examination. This innocent girl underwent the medical checkup, and the results confirmed that Anna was indeed 13 years old. Incredibly, Barbara and Katerina had successfully deceived both the legal and medical systems. With Anna's age verified, Clara was legally allowed to adopt her. Barbara received a birth certificate with a fabricated birthday of December 2, 1993, and she was officially recognized as Anishka. Now, we must turn our attention back to Jacob and Andre, Clara's two sons. As Barbara ingrained herself deeper into their family, she began to manipulate Clara against her own children. Clara's neglect became evident as Jacob and Andre acted out in response to the lack of attention they were receiving. Their misbehavior was understandable. They were feeling abandoned in favor of Anna. Unfortunately, this behavior played right into Barbara's hands. She convinced Clara that Jacob and Andre were bullying her, reinforcing the idea that they were mean and unkind. Clara, seeing her sons misbehave, began to believe Anna's claims and started punishing Jacob and Andre more severely. One day, Anna approached Clara with a suggestion on how to discipline her sons better. It was shocking that Clara would take advice from a 13-year-old girl about parenting, but she was so wrapped up in Anna's manipulation that she listened intently. Anna mentioned that her doctor, the one supposedly treating her for cancer, was also an expert in child discipline. Soon enough, the mysterious doctor began messaging Clara again with advice on how to manage her children's behavior. The doctor insisted that to make Anna feel more at home, Clara needed to stop Jacob and Andre from bullying her. To do this effectively, the doctor recommended severe punishments for the boys. This is where the story takes a deeply troubling turn. The doctor advised Clara to cut off all external influences from Jacob and Andre's lives. Following this advice, Clara pulled her sons out of school and began homeschooling them. They were also forbidden from seeing any family members, no visits from their father or grandparents, whom they were very close to. But the punishments didn't stop there. The doctor suggested physical discipline as well. Clara began hitting her sons with objects like wooden spoons or belt buckles whenever they misbehaved. It wasn't just physical punishment, psychological torment became part of their daily lives too. As the situation escalated in this toxic environment filled with manipulation and abuse, it became increasingly clear that Barbara's deception was leading everyone down a dark path. The situation for Jacob and Andre grew increasingly dire under Clara's misguided parenting. The punishments they faced were horrific. The boys were made to kneel in one spot for hours on end, unable to move. At times, they were locked in a dark cupboard with no light, no food, and no access to a bathroom. They were forced to sleep on the cold concrete floor without a bed, enduring conditions that no child should ever have to face. It was heart-wrenching to think about the suffering they endured. Before Anna entered their lives, Clara had been a loving and caring mother. It was shocking to see how drastically she had changed, all under the influence of a mysterious doctor who communicated only through text messages and a 13-year-old girl she had just adopted. Clara's transformation was bewildering, especially considering the well-being of her own children. But there was more to this story than just Clara's troubling behavior. It is suspected that a cult was somehow involved in the way Jacob and Andre were being treated. The leader of this cult was none other than Barbara's biological father, Joseph. Yes, Barbara's dad was at the helm of this organization, which went by the name of the Grail Movement. The Grail Movement is an international religious group that originated in Germany during the 1930s. Over time, it splintered into many different factions, each with its own beliefs and practices. Joseph led one of these factions, and while some groups within the Grail Movement may have benign intentions, others have been linked to disturbing behaviors. For example, in 2008, a leader from another faction of the Grail Movement was arrested for keeping female followers as slaves. He subjected them to physical and psychological abuse, and the conditions were so terrible that one woman tragically lost her life. This incident highlighted just how dangerous some factions of this movement could be. In the early 2000s, Joseph rose to prominence as a leader within his faction of the Grail Movement based in the Czech Republic. Although the exact number of followers he had is unclear, it is known that his group held some extreme beliefs. They taught that individuals could earn their way into heaven through good deeds, but also believed that these good deeds absolved them from any sins they committed. This warped ideology allowed followers to justify criminal behavior and abuse as long as they believed it served a greater purpose. A particularly troubling aspect of this cult was its harsh stance on child discipline. They believed that children needed to be raised with strict control and severe punishment to grow into upstanding citizens. This philosophy undoubtedly influenced Barbara's actions toward Jacob and Andre. Given her father's role as the cult leader, it's no surprise that Barbara was also involved in this organization. Katerina soon joined as well after meeting Barbara. She too became entangled in this dangerous belief system. In 2006, Barbara, now known as Anna, had fully embedded herself into Clara's life. With a manipulative agenda, Barbara and Katerina decided it was time for Clara to join their cult. They believed that by bringing Clara into the fold, they could further brainwash her into accepting their twisted beliefs. The cult was complicit in the ruse that Barbara was merely a 13-year-old girl named Anna. As Clara became more involved with the cult, she started receiving lessons on how to discipline her two sons, Jacob and Andre. Unfortunately, this led to even harsher treatment for the boys. In August 2006, Clara received a chilling message from the mysterious doctor instructing her to take Jacob and Andre to a re-education camp located in a secluded cottage far from civilization. This camp was run by members of the cult. At the cottage were 3 cult members, 29-year-old Jan Tarek, 26-year-old Hanna Basova, and 23-year-old Jan Skrila, Barbara's younger brother. Although Barbara's father, the cult leader, wasn't present at the cottage, it was clear he was aware of the events unfolding. Upon arriving at the cottage with her sons, Clara was told to abandon her role as a mother and instead view herself as a tutor. The boys were then taken away by the cult members and placed in dog cages so small that neither could stand up. They were forced to remain in these cages at all times except for when they were taken out for reprogramming. They slept, ate, and even went to the bathroom inside these cages, completely isolated from one another despite being adjacent. When they were let out of their cages, Jacob and Andre were sometimes restrained with collars like animals. They were tied up around the house to prevent any chance of escape. The boys were barely fed, leaving them weak and unable to resist their captors. At just 7 and 9 years old, they faced severe punishments if they attempted to communicate or escape. The so-called reprogramming sessions were even more horrific. The boys were forced to read vulgar texts aloud and memorize them while being punished for doing so. Over the following days and weeks, they endured brutal treatment. They had bags placed over their heads and were beaten with belt buckles and bamboo poles. Sharp forks scratched their skin, cigarettes were pressed into their flesh, and their heads were repeatedly submerged in buckets of water. Boiling water was poured over them as well. It is unimaginable that such cruelty could be inflicted upon innocent children. The reality of their suffering is heartbreaking and difficult to comprehend. Clara had once been a loving mother before Anna entered her life. Now she was following orders that led her children into unimaginable torment. The transformation in Clara's character was shocking, especially considering she had been manipulated by a mysterious doctor who only communicated through text messages and a 13-year-old girl who was actually an adult. As the situation escalated into pure horror at the cottage, it became evident that this case involved not just a dysfunctional family but also a sinister cult mentality that justified abuse in the name of discipline. The cruel and sadistic punishments inflicted upon Jacob and Andre were carried out not only by the 3 cult members at the cottage but also by Anna, formerly known as Barbara, Katerina, and shockingly, Clara herself. It was unfathomable that Clara had been convinced and brainwashed into torturing her own children. No matter the circumstances, a mother should never be able to justify abusing her own kids. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, the physical abuse was accompanied by severe psychological torment. The boys were subjected to loud industrial music played at high volumes all day, reminiscent of other notorious cases of psychological torture. They were told there were numerous cult members hiding in the house who wanted to harm them. This was a lie meant to instill fear. While there were indeed people in the house who wished them harm, the boys were manipulated into believing they were surrounded by even more threats. To further terrorize Jacob and Andre, Barbara would sometimes hold Andre's head under a bucket of water for extended periods, nearly drowning him. The cult members aimed to turn the brothers against each other, instructing them to harm one another. On one horrifying occasion, Jacob was forced to dig his own grave and lie in it, pretending to be dead. Then Andre was brought in and shown his brother dead, only to be told he could bring Jacob back to life if he behaved. The most disturbing part of this nightmare came when Clara was instructed by the cult members that in order to truly reprogram her children into becoming good human beings, she needed to cut a piece of flesh from one of them. This grotesque act was intended to be shared among the cult members, who would consume it as part of their twisted rituals. Incredibly, Clara agreed to this horrific demand. Initially hesitant and needing assistance from the cult members, she ultimately chose her younger son Andre as the victim. She cut a circular piece of flesh from Andre's buttocks, which was then passed around for each cult member to consume. There are even rumors that both boys were forced to eat some of their own flesh during this ordeal. When you consider that Andre was alive when this happened, without any pain medication or anesthesia, it is almost too much to bear. The reality of such cruelty is heartbreaking and difficult to comprehend. For approximately 3 months, Jacob and Andre remained trapped in this living nightmare. After this time, the other cult members informed Clara that she was no longer needed at the cottage and could leave with Anna, Barbara. Clara and Anna then left the cottage together, embarking on a search for a new home, one that would accommodate their growing needs while still shrouded in darkness from their past actions. After leaving the cottage, Clara and Anna found a new house in a town called Carvina. The pronunciation of the town's name seemed to vary everywhere, but what was certain was that the cult funded this new home. In this house, Anna received her own beautifully decorated room filled with toys and clothes, as she was considered the chosen one. Meanwhile, Clara's own children, Jacob and Andre, remained locked away in cages back at the cottage. About a month later, after 4 months of torment in the cottage, it was decided that Andre would be allowed to return home to Clara. However, Jacob was to stay behind. The reasoning for this decision was unclear. Perhaps they believed Jacob needed more reprogramming. While it might seem like a relief that one boy was escaping the torment, Andre's situation would not improve upon his return. As soon as Andre came home, he was sent to the cupboard under the stairs, where he would remain in darkness without any light or comfort. He had no bed, blankets, or pillows, only the hard floor to sleep on. The only form of hygiene he received was a bucket of cold water thrown over him. With no access to a toilet, he had to urinate and defecate in the cramped space, which was never cleaned. If he vomited from his horrific surroundings, he might have been forced to consume his own vomit. To prevent any chance of escape, even though it seemed impossible for him to escape from a locked cupboard, Andre's wrists and ankles were bound together. He often found himself left naked and unable to move. This cruel treatment lasted for 5 long months. You may wonder when this nightmare would finally end. Fortunately, a stroke of good fortune was about to occur. On May 7, 2007, a man named Edward was at home in Carvina trying to set up a baby monitor for the first time. Struggling with the technology, he suddenly saw something shocking on the screen, a video of a child who was not his own. Instead, it showed a naked young boy tied up on a concrete floor. Initially confused by what he saw, Edward thought there must be something wrong with his monitor. He dismissed it as a malfunction and went about his day. However, throughout the day, he couldn't shake off the image of that child lying helplessly on the concrete floor. Concerned and curious, he told his wife about what he had seen earlier. Later that day, they both turned on the monitor again and were horrified to see the same child appearing on their screen once more. This time, they watched as the child roamed around the small concrete room and appeared to be eating something off the floor. When Edward and his wife saw the disturbing images on their baby monitor, they became increasingly alarmed. It dawned on them that what they were witnessing was a live feed from somewhere nearby, and they immediately called the police. The officers arrived quickly and reviewed the footage, realizing that the signal must be coming from a house in close proximity. They could hear music playing in the background, which was consistent with the cult's practice of using music as a form of punishment. The police stepped outside Edward's home to listen for the music and traced it to a neighboring house directly across the street. When they knocked on the door, a woman in her 30s answered. The officers explained they were looking for a child, but she denied any knowledge of one, insisting, "No children here." Inside his home, Edward could still hear the police officer's voice on his monitor, confirming they were at the right location. Sensing something was amiss, the police forced their way into the house. The woman who had opened the door was Clara Maurova. As they searched for the child, they discovered a locked cupboard under the stairs, which raised immediate suspicion. The officers attempted to break open the door when suddenly, a young girl named Anna emerged. She began screaming, "Mama! Mama! What's happening?" and rushed to grab onto the officers' legs, desperately trying to stop them from entering the cupboard. The officers mistakenly believed Anna was another child in need of rescue and didn't realize she was actually an adult trying to prevent them from uncovering the truth. They managed to hold her back and eventually broke the padlock on the cupboard under the stairs. What they found inside was horrifying. Andre was naked, tied up, malnourished, and lying in his own vomit and excrement. He had endured months of mistreatment but was finally rescued. Andre was immediately taken to safety while Clara was arrested on the spot. Katerina was also present at the house and was arrested as well. The police initially believed that Barbara, who had been posing as Anna, was just a 13-year-old girl and therefore did not arrest her. Instead, she was taken to a children's shelter along with Andreju. After Andreju's rescue, authorities soon learned he had an older brother named Jacob. The search for Jacob revealed that he was still at the cottage with other cult members. Interestingly, Jacob had been allowed to attend public school during this time, which seemed odd given that one of the cult's rules was to avoid outside influences. This decision made it easier for authorities to track him down. Once both Andre and Jacob were in custody, it became clear that they were in terrible condition. They were covered in scars, cuts, and bruises. Their skin appeared pale due to malnourishment. Both boys had suffered serious psychological effects from their ordeal. It was discovered that they exhibited mood and developmental disorders resulting from their treatment, lack of food, sleep deprivation, and being kept in darkness for extended periods. When rescued, Andrej was 8 years old and Jacob 10. Tragically, they struggled to function like typical children their age. They needed to be retaught basic skills such as how to sleep in a bed or use utensils. The process of rehabilitation began slowly as both boys started sharing their experiences with authorities. Their bravery in recounting their trauma revealed the full extent of abuse they had endured. The cult had threatened them with severe consequences if they ever spoke about what happened. They were told that if they did, their lives would be in danger. Fortunately, after some time adjusting to their new circumstances, both boys began attending school again and started living more normal lives. They were eventually reunited with their father and grandparents, a heartwarming development amid such darkness. After being rescued, Anna, also known as Barbara, was placed under the protection of a children's shelter alongside Andre and Jacob. Authorities initially believed they would need to rehabilitate her just like the two boys, as she was considered a victim as well. However, after only a few days in the shelter, Anna escaped through an open window. When the police discovered her absence, they feared she had been kidnapped by her captors. A massive search effort was launched to find her, involving hundreds of officers, helicopters, and police dogs. As the search intensified, Edward continued to monitor the baby monitor at his home and was shocked to hear Anna's voice. Meanwhile, a letter arrived at the police station from Anna, claiming that her mother Clara was innocent and that Andrej and Jacob were lying about their abuse. The police were skeptical. They recognized that the letter's grammar and language were far too sophisticated for a 13-year-old girl. Realizing they needed to find Anna quickly, authorities plastered her picture everywhere. Days later, someone recognized her photo and contacted the police, revealing that the girl in the picture was not a 13-year-old but actually a 33-year-old woman named Barbara Skrylova. The police were initially taken aback by this revelation but soon confirmed it through DNA tests comparing samples from Anna with those on file for Barbara. This shocking discovery led the police to publicly announce they were searching for Barbara Skrylova rather than a missing child. They shared details about the child abuse case and the cult's involvement, captivating public interest. One major newspaper in the Czech Republic even offered a reward for any information leading to her whereabouts. Despite these efforts, Barbara seemed to vanish without a trace for 7 long months. However, her luck was about to run out. It turned out that she had fled to Norway, where she adopted yet another false identity, this time posing as a 13-year-old boy named Adam. After escaping from the children's shelter, Barbara managed to track down cult members who helped her obtain a passport under this new identity. Once in Norway, she enrolled in a boarding school where she continued her deception for several months. Although some people at the school noticed that Adam seemed unusually mature for his age, Barbara managed to maintain her cover. Eventually, concerns about Adam's behavior prompted school officials to investigate further. However, before they could act on their suspicions, Barbara disappeared from the school. The authorities were notified immediately, leading to another extensive search for Adam. A picture of Adam circulated widely as law enforcement sought to locate him. Eventually, he was found in northern Norway, where authorities finally uncovered Barbara's true identity as Barbara Skrylova. After being found, Anna, also known as Barbara Skrylova, was deported back to the Czech Republic. The situation seemed surreal. How could someone manipulate so many people and evade justice for so long? With her return, all the key players in this tragic case were finally in custody. The trial commenced, and in a shocking display, Barbara appeared in court clutching a teddy bear and a children's book. Both Clara and Katerina faced serious charges of child abuse and torture, while Barbara was charged with child abuse and additional offenses related to her false identities. The 3 cult members who had been at the cottage were also present during the proceedings. However, Barbara's father, Joseph, the cult leader, had fled and remained at large. As the trial unfolded, it was revealed that Barbara did not have any mental health conditions that could explain her actions. There was no diagnosis that justified her elaborate deception or the abuse she had inflicted. This left many baffled. It was difficult to understand what motivated someone to commit such heinous acts. Clara and Katerina were both deemed competent to stand trial. When Clara took the stand, she broke down in tears, which frustrated many observers. Instead of taking responsibility for her actions, she attempted to shift blame onto others, claiming she had been manipulated by Barbara, Katerina, and the mysterious doctor. She expressed remorse but maintained that she was simply trying to do what was best for her sons. Katerina's testimony was equally perplexing. She defended Barbara, which left many questioning her motivations. She blamed Clara for everything that had happened. This accusation led to a heated moment in court where Clara stood up and shouted at her sister. Finally, it was Barbara's turn to testify. She adopted a childlike persona during her testimony, attempting to portray herself as an innocent young girl who hadn't done anything wrong. On the stand, she claimed that Jacob and Andrew were the real problem and insisted they deserved the treatment they received. After all the testimonies were heard, all 3 women, Barbara, Clara, and Katerina, along with the 3 cult members, were found guilty on all charges. However, the sentences handed down were shockingly lenient given the severity of their crimes. Each cult member received only 7 years in prison for their roles in the abuse. Clara was sentenced to 9 years for torturing and neglecting her own children. Katerina received 10 years due to her significant involvement in manipulating Clara. But perhaps most infuriating of all was Barbara's sentence, just 5 years in prison. Many felt that she was the primary instigator behind the horrific events. She had orchestrated much of the abuse and manipulation throughout this entire ordeal. It seemed unjust that she would receive such a short sentence compared to others involved. As this tragic case came to a close, it left many questions unanswered about how someone could inflict such pain on innocent children, and how they could manipulate those around them into participating in such cruelty. 15 years after the trial, all 6 defendants in this horrific case have been released. It's infuriating to think that they are now free, walking the streets and living their lives, while Jacob and Andre will forever bear the scars of their trauma. The injustice is palpable. How can it be fair that those who inflicted such pain can move on while the boys remain haunted by their past? Barbara was released in 2012 and, true to form, changed her identity. She is reportedly living on a disability pension in an undisclosed location. Clara was released in 2013 and thankfully no longer has custody of her children. Katerina followed suit, being released in 2014, but not much is known about her current whereabouts. This case of the Mauer family is one of the most disturbing I have ever covered. I find myself at a loss for analysis. I can't fully comprehend why these events unfolded as they did. It seems Barbara was desperately seeking a parental figure and attention, but why did Clara go along with such horrific actions? And what motivated Katerina to support Barbara? There are unsettling rumors regarding the cult involved in this case. Some speculate that the torture of Jacob and Andrej was filmed and distributed on the dark web for money, allowing other predators to watch and possibly participate in their abuse. While we don't want to consider such horrors, it's a reality that these things can happen. Authorities believe that the cameras set up in the cottage and cupboard were primarily for surveillance, but we may never know the full extent of their intentions. As we reflect on this tragic case, it's essential to focus on the victims, Jacob and Andre. After the trial, they continued to receive care from authorities and were eventually placed in the custody of their grandparents. They began reconnecting with their father more frequently, which was a positive step forward. The boys started attending school again and underwent extensive treatment and therapy. Reports suggest that Jacob and Andrzej made significant strides in their recovery. However, the psychological effects of their ordeal will likely remain with them for life. As they grew older, both boys decided to visit their mother in prison. In 2013, when Clara was released, 15-year-old Jacob and 13-year-old Andrzej chose to reconnect with her in an effort to establish some sort of relationship. Denise's story begins in a small, sunny town called Huntington Beach, where she was born around 1987. She was the cherished daughter of Jane and Mike Huskins. Growing up in this beautiful coastal city, known for its surfing and warm weather, Denise enjoyed a close-knit family life. She loved riding bikes around the neighborhood with her brother, Devin, and was known to be a bright and cheerful child. Her family adored her and always encouraged her dreams. From a young age, Denise wanted to work in healthcare, showing her caring nature. However, life wasn't always perfect for Denise. When she was still a child, her parents decided to separate. Although the divorce was tough, they managed to remain a supportive family. Denise spent time with her extended family on both sides, which helped her feel loved despite the changes at home. But there were shadows in her childhood that would haunt her. At just 12 years old, Denise faced a terrible trauma when she was sexually assaulted. This experience left her feeling ashamed and confused, leading her to believe it was somehow her fault. She kept this secret for many years, carrying the heavy burden alone. It was only later that she discovered the person who had hurt her had also harmed another girl. This revelation filled her with guilt for not speaking out sooner. Determined to protect herself and others, Denise promised herself that if anything like that ever happened again, she would go straight to the police. Sadly, fate had other plans. When she turned 19, Denise attended a party where she fell asleep. When she woke up, she found one of her close friends assaulting her. This time, she found the courage to report it immediately. But when she went to the police station, an officer told her not to pursue the case because similar cases often went nowhere and would waste everyone's time. This advice left Denise feeling even more defeated and betrayed by those who were supposed to help her. Despite these harrowing experiences, Denise did not let them define her. She focused on her education and worked hard in school. In 2009, she graduated from California State University with a Bachelor of Science degree and a minor in business entrepreneurship. Her passion for helping others led her to pursue a doctorate in physical therapy at Long Island University, which she completed in 2012. Denise began her career in physical therapy in Boston before moving on to specialize in PNF, proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation, at Kaiser's flagship hospital in Vallejo, California. It was there that she met Erin Quinn, who would become an important part of her life. Erin was born in 1986 to Mary Ann and Joe Quinn and grew up in a small coastal town not far from Sacramento. Their paths crossed at a time when both were navigating their own challenges but also looking forward to brighter days ahead. Erin was known as an easygoing kid, and his parents often spoke fondly of him. He shared a special bond with his brother, who eventually became an FBI agent. Erin was the captain of his high school football team and had a reputation as quite the ladies' man. He had many girlfriends, and according to his mother, he certainly broke a few hearts along the way. He had a clear type, blonde, blue-eyed. This detail would later become significant in his life. Erin's academic journey was impressive. He graduated from the University of California, Davis, with a degree in genetics in 2007. After that, he pursued further education and earned his doctorate in physical therapy from Pacific University in 2010. With a passion for helping others, he began working at Kaiser in Vallejo, where he completed a 9-month residency program specializing in proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation, PNF, just like Denise. At Kaiser, Erin dedicated himself to helping patients with severe neurological trauma and later expanded his practice to include children with special needs. His expertise and dedication were well regarded among his peers. It was here that he met Andrea Roberts, another doctor in the physical therapy division. Their professional relationship blossomed into romance, and after a few years together, they became engaged. In preparation for their wedding, Aaron purchased a beautiful house on Mare Island, a picturesque peninsula near Vallejo known for its quiet suburbs and family-friendly atmosphere. However, despite the idyllic setting, Aaron and Andrea's relationship was rocky. While they managed to maintain professionalism at work, their home life was filled with tension. Andrea felt overwhelmed by the upcoming wedding, while Aaron feared losing her. In 2014, everything changed when Aaron discovered that Andrea had been unfaithful to him with a police officer in Vallejo. Heartbroken and betrayed, he called off the wedding just weeks before it was supposed to happen. In June of that year, Denise started working at Kaiser and quickly formed a connection with Aaron. They respected each other's work and were undeniably attracted to one another. Initially, Denise felt uneasy about their budding relationship because she looked quite similar to Andrea. Both were blonde and worked in the same field. She worried that she might just be a rebound for Aaron after his breakup. However, Aaron reassured her of his feelings and took her on dates and trips. They spent cozy nights together at his home on Mare Island, where Denise even met his parents. Aaron's mother liked Denise but cautioned him not to rush into anything new too quickly. Meanwhile, Andrea was still in the picture. She claimed that Aaron still had feelings for her. At work, they interacted amicably enough, but Andrea had to set boundaries because Aaron would often try to hug or kiss her despite her protests. In February 2015, Denise's world turned upside down when she went through Aaron's phone and found messages between him and Andrea. In those texts, Aaron expressed a desire to rekindle their relationship and even mentioned leaving Denise for her. Devastated by this betrayal, Denise felt her dreams for the future with Aaron shatter. Realizing he had made a grave mistake, Aaron promised Denise he would cut off all contact with Andrea outside of work. They decided to take a month-long break from their relationship while maintaining professionalism at work. During this time, Aaron sought therapy to address his issues and prove to Denise that he truly loved her. The night of March 22, 2015, was supposed to mark a fresh start for Aaron and Denise. They had just decided to leave the past behind and embrace a new chapter in their lives together. Little did they know that their world was about to be turned upside down. Around 3:04 a.m. on March 23, they were jolted awake by blinding white lights flooding their bedroom. Confused and terrified, they could see flashlights and lasers, but the intruders remained hidden in the shadows. The sight of firearms added to the horror of the moment. Imagine waking up to such a nightmare. It's a fear that lurks in the back of everyone's mind. The intruders ordered them to lie face down on the bed. Aaron and Denise felt hands gripping them tightly as zip ties were fastened around their wrists. Panic set in as they were blindfolded with swim goggles and duct tape, leaving them in complete darkness. The fear was palpable. They had no idea what would happen next. Then came the eerie sounds of headphones being placed over their ears. Strange noises filled the air. Ambient sounds mixed with unsettling wind chimes created an atmosphere of dread. A voice cut through the noise, announcing that they would be taking their blood pressure. The cuffs tightened around their arms, and they could feel the pressure as the kidnappers monitored their vitals. This was no ordinary kidnapping. It felt almost clinical. The voice explained that they would be given a sedative, a mix of medications that would render them unconscious. As they opened their mouths to receive the drugs, Aaron began to shiver uncontrollably, asking for a blanket. One of the intruders casually remarked, "I forgot how cold it is because we're all wearing wetsuits." The mention of wetsuits raised more questions than answers. Were they trying to keep evidence from contaminating the scene? Or did they arrive by water? It was all so bizarre and meticulously planned, something you would expect from a movie rather than a home invasion. After administering the sedatives, the kidnappers led Aaron and Denise into the living room while they retreated into another room to discuss their plans. When they returned, they revealed that Denise wasn't actually their intended target. It was Andrea Roberts, Aaron's ex-fiancée who had moved out months earlier. However, since this was a training exercise for them, they decided to kidnap Denise anyway. They informed Aaron that he would need to pay a ransom of $115,000 for her safe return. To ensure compliance, they taped off a section of the living room and installed a camera in the corner, warning Aaron that if he stepped outside this designated area or attempted to call for help, Denise would not be released. With that, they took the keys to Aaron's Toyota Camry and placed Denise in the trunk before speeding away. Moments later, as the sedatives took effect, Aaron lost consciousness. When he finally woke up around 11:30 a.m., he found himself alone in his home, disoriented and panicked. 6 hours had passed since Denise had been taken from him. It felt surreal, like a strange dream, but reality quickly set in when he noticed the tape marking off an area on the rug and a camera mounted in the corner of the room. Aaron's heart raced as he realized he was being watched. He feared for Denise's safety if he dared to leave that red square on the floor. As he sat there in despair, an email notification broke through his thoughts. The kidnappers were demanding $115,000. He immediately contacted his bank but learned he could only withdraw $3,500 per day. Desperate to save Denise, he replied to the kidnappers with this information and waited anxiously for their response. Can you imagine sitting there in fear and uncertainty, hoping for any sign that she was okay? Hours passed without any word from them. The dread grew heavier as time dragged on. He couldn't shake off his growing mistrust of these criminals who held his girlfriend's life in their hands. As Aaron waited anxiously for any updates from his captors, he couldn't help but think about how everything had spiraled out of control so quickly, from planning for a future together just hours earlier to now being trapped in this nightmare scenario where every second felt like an eternity. The reality of what was happening began to sink in deeper with each passing moment. This was no ordinary crime, it was a meticulously planned abduction that threatened everything he held dear. After the horrifying events of that night, Aaron felt a surge of urgency to act. His first instinct was to reach out to his brother, a special agent with the FBI. At first, Aaron hesitated, wanting his brother to call the police for him, fearing that the kidnappers might be monitoring his phone. However, his brother reassured him that the intruders couldn't track his calls and that the camera they had installed was merely a scare tactic. Finally, at 1:53 p.m., nearly 8.5 hours after Denise had been taken, Aaron made the call to the police. "My girlfriend got kidnapped last night," he said, providing his address and explaining that he had been drugged and tied up, which was why he hadn't contacted them sooner. Officers arrived shortly after, and body camera footage captured the chaotic scene: the taped-off living room, the camera in the corner, and the disheveled bedroom where the intruders had ransacked their belongings. The officers instructed Aaron to lie face down on the bed as they began questioning him. They asked if he had been using drugs, to which he explained that the kidnappers had forced him to take a NyQuil mixture. When they inquired about his history with drugs, he firmly stated that he had none. By 3:04 p.m., Aaron found himself at the police station for further questioning. The officers took some of his blood for toxicology tests, swabbed his mouth, and confiscated his phone. In a baffling move, they put his phone into airplane mode, cutting off any communication with the kidnappers, while handing him jail clothes to wear. This decision seemed nonsensical to Aaron. He was trying to explain that Denise was in danger and that her captors were still communicating with him. Then came Detective Matt Mustard, whose name sounded almost comical in such a serious situation. He entered the room with an air of authority but quickly shifted between playing good cop and bad cop. Initially, he assured Aaron that they would treat him as a victim. However, putting him in jail clothes suggested otherwise. It felt like they were already suspecting him of wrongdoing. Despite this odd treatment, Aaron still believed that the police would help find Denise. He recounted every detail of the kidnapping multiple times: the strange music from wind chimes, the wetsuits worn by the intruders, hoping this would aid in their investigation. But instead of validating his account, it seemed to lead them down a path of tunnel vision, where they refused to consider that he might be telling the truth. Meanwhile, 400 miles away in Huntington Beach, Denise's family was informed of her disappearance. Her mother, Jane, was in disbelief. Her daughter was thriving as a physical therapist and had just started a new relationship. The news hit her like a ton of bricks. Denise's father, Mike, expressed how this was every father's worst nightmare. He had never met Aaron but trusted Denise's judgment about her relationships. She always chose good men. However, Denise's brother Devin felt differently. Although he had never met Aaron either, he grew suspicious about what could have happened to his sister. As news of Denise's kidnapping spread through media outlets, reporters began digging into every detail. Henry Lee, a well-known crime reporter for the San Francisco Chronicle, became involved as the case gained national attention. The media frenzy only added pressure on law enforcement as they struggled to piece together what had happened. As days passed without any leads or breakthroughs in finding Denise, Aaron remained at the police station under intense scrutiny. The officers questioned him relentlessly, raising doubts about his credibility and involvement in her disappearance. It felt like an uphill battle against an unyielding system that refused to see him as anything but a suspect. The situation grew increasingly dire as time wore on. Denise's family feared for her safety, while Aaron faced mounting pressure from investigators who seemed more inclined to blame him than to search for her. What should have been a straightforward investigation into a kidnapping turned into a nightmare for both Denise's family and Aaron as they navigated suspicion and doubt from those who were supposed to help them find her. The clock was ticking. Each moment brought them closer to an uncertain fate as they fought against not only their fears but also an unyielding system that seemed determined to overlook their plight. The search for Denise Huskins intensified as investigators deployed sonar equipment to examine an object in the water, hoping it would lead them to her. Despite the grim circumstances, Denise's family clung to hope, especially her father, who believed she was alive and fighting. "I pray to God she's not going through anything terrible," he said, expressing his faith in her strength. Police confirmed that Denise had been taken by force from her home in Vallejo, and a ransom was being demanded. The kidnapping occurred early on a Monday morning, but Aaron, her boyfriend, did not call the police until hours later. This delay raised suspicion among law enforcement about his involvement. "That's a long time to witness a kidnapping and then go to the police," a family member noted. As the investigation unfolded, comparisons were drawn between this case and the infamous Lacey and Scott Peterson case. Police began to suspect that Denise might have been murdered and disposed of in the water, explaining their focus on searching nearby areas. Meanwhile, reporters like Henry Lee interviewed neighbors about Aaron and Denise. It became clear that they were not well known in the community. Neighbors mentioned that the couple worked long hours and hadn't heard anything unusual the night before. Disturbingly, law enforcement told Denise's family that when a woman goes missing, she is usually found dead, a harsh statement that shattered their hopes and highlighted the police's tunnel vision. Back at the station, Detective Mustard began to direct his suspicions toward Aaron. He suggested that Aaron had fabricated the entire story to cover up a crime against Denise. Mustard claimed that Aaron's narrative didn't add up, stating, "I think something bad happened in your home between you and her." This aggressive line of questioning left Aaron stunned. He could hardly process the accusations while still reeling from the sedatives he had been given. Despite being exhausted and under immense pressure, Aaron remained calm as he repeated his account of events. He knew time was critical in finding Denise but felt trapped in an interrogation room where detectives seemed more interested in pinning blame on him than in finding her. Detective Mustard relentlessly poked holes in Aaron's story. When discussing the wetsuits worn by the intruders, he sarcastically asked if they had swum to Aaron's home. He suggested that missing comforters and blankets had been used to wrap Denise after she was harmed. The detective even speculated that perhaps Denise had overdosed on drugs from work, implying that Aaron had hidden her body out of fear. "You did it," Mustard asserted. "They did not come into your home and kidnap her for ransom." Each accusation felt like a blow to Aaron as he insisted on his innocence. At 4:30 a.m. the next day, Aaron took a lie detector test administered by FBI Special Agent Peter French. By this time, he was utterly exhausted, having endured hours of questioning without any sign of support or understanding from law enforcement. After taking the lie detector test, Special Agent Peter French informed Aaron that he had failed. This revelation sent shockwaves through Aaron as French aggressively interrogated him, asking pointed questions like, "Was it an accident, or are you a calculated monster who couldn't handle a breakup and killed her?" He implied that Aaron knew where Denise was and what had happened to her. In response, Aaron insisted that he wanted the police to find her and declared that if this was how the investigation was going, he needed a lawyer. Aaron then reached out to attorneys Daniel Russo and Amy Morton, who had been practicing law since the 1970s. When Dan first heard about Aaron's ordeal, he was taken aback. "This is crazy," he remarked upon learning what Aaron had been through. Dan visited the police station and found Aaron in a fragile state. He had been there for 18 hours without sleep and was still affected by the drugs from the night before. Dan felt that Aaron had been made the scapegoat and described him as being eaten alive by the situation. Dan told the police that Aaron had provided them with DNA samples, fingerprints, and other physical evidence. If they weren't going to arrest him, he insisted on taking Aaron with him. Back at Dan and Amy's office, Aaron recounted his story again. Amy remarked that it was absolutely incredible. When they asked him to tell it once more, he remained consistent with every detail. Despite their belief in him, they worried that because of his attempts to reconcile with Andrea Roberts, his ex-girlfriend, if Denise were found dead, investigators would see a motive and pin it on him. Meanwhile, Denise's father Mike appeared on television to appeal for her safe return. He expressed his love for her and reassured her that their family was there for her. Then, on March 24 at 12:24 p.m., Henry Lee received an email from an unknown sender with the subject line Denise. The email contained an audio clip of someone claiming to be Denise. In it, she mentioned events occurring that day, including a plane crash in the Alps. However, there were inaccuracies in the transcription of her message reported by HLN. For example, she incorrectly stated that she attended her first concert with her mother when it was actually with her friend Bethany. It became clear that the kidnapper was instructing her on what to say in order to prove she was alive. Henry sent the audio clip to the Vallejo Police Department, who then called Mike Huskins back to the station for further questioning. He identified the voice as his daughter's. Denise's family members were interviewed separately about her character and past relationships. They asked about any trauma she might have experienced, including her mother revealing that Denise had been molested as a child. In a shocking moment during questioning, Detective Mustard suggested that women who were sexually assaulted as children often fabricate stories later in life to relive the thrill. This offensive comment exemplified victim blaming at its worst. Meanwhile, FBI lead investigator David Sesma interrogated Aaron without recording it. However, Amy Morton smartly recorded their conversation on her phone. They asked Aaron if Denise had resisted during the kidnapping and if she knew about his financial situation. They even asked if he thought Denise could be behind everything. As the investigation into Denise Huskins' disappearance unfolded, authorities began to shift blame onto her rather than focusing on the actual events surrounding her kidnapping. Drawing parallels to the movie Gone Girl, which had been released just a year prior, police became fixated on the idea that Denise might have faked her own abduction to frame her boyfriend, Aaron Quinn. In the film, a woman orchestrates her own kidnapping to punish her unfaithful husband, and law enforcement seemed influenced by this narrative, losing sight of the reality of Denise's situation. On March 23, 2015, around 5 a.m., Denise was forcibly taken from Aaron's home and stuffed into the trunk of a Toyota Camry. Still wearing blackout goggles and with her hands zip-tied, she felt herself drifting in and out of consciousness as the sedative began to take effect. The car eventually stopped, and she heard her kidnapper's voice instructing her not to speak or scream before transferring her to another vehicle. Remarkably, Denise speculated that the new vehicle was a Mustang based on the sound of the engine. Inside the new car, she felt the acceleration as they drove onto the freeway, desperately trying to remember every turn and noise but soon succumbing to the effects of the drugs again. Hours later, she woke up to daylight and unfamiliar sounds, pine trees and birds chirping, indicating she was in a remote area. The kidnapper dragged her into a cabin and told her that this wasn't meant for her but for Aaron's ex-girlfriend, Andrea Roberts. He claimed to be part of a black market organization that kidnapped people for ransom and assured Denise that Aaron had been given instructions for her release within 48 hours. Isolated and drugged, Denise feared for her life as she realized she was at the mercy of her captor. Just before passing out again, she thought about how unlikely it seemed that she would make it out alive. When she regained consciousness later that afternoon, she noticed a shift in light and heard French pop music playing from another room. The surreal nature of her ordeal felt like something out of a horror movie as she processed her bizarre circumstances. Back at the police station, investigators grew increasingly skeptical of Aaron's account. Detective Mustard pointed fingers directly at him, suggesting that he might have harmed Denise and concocted an elaborate story to cover his tracks. Their tunnel vision led them to believe that if Denise were found dead, they could pin it on Aaron due to his past relationship with Andrea. As Denise's family anxiously awaited news about her safety, they faced an uphill battle against law enforcement's assumptions. Mike Huskins appeared on television pleading for his daughter's safe return, expressing love and concern for her well-being. Meanwhile, Henry Lee received an email from an unknown sender claiming to be Denise. The email included an audio clip where a voice identified as hers stated that she was kidnapped but otherwise fine. However, inaccuracies in the transcription raised questions about its authenticity. During her harrowing ordeal, Denise found herself in a terrifying situation, yet surprisingly, she discovered a strange sense of comfort in the music her kidnapper played. The melodies somehow eased the tension and normalized the man who had taken her. He allowed her bathroom breaks and shared snippets of his life, mentioning his military service and struggles with PTSD and insomnia. At this point, Denise thought he seemed somewhat nice and hoped that if she stayed calm, everything would eventually resolve itself. However, that fragile sense of safety shattered when he returned with a heaviness in his steps. In a calm voice, he explained that they had no collateral to ensure she wouldn't go to the police. He then told her he was going to have sex with her and that it would be recorded. This chilling revelation sent shivers down Denise's spine. She considered fighting back but ultimately decided against it. She just wanted the nightmare to end. As the assault occurred, she felt as if she were having an out-of-body experience. Afterward, he took her to the bathroom to clean up and told her that she could remove the goggles when he wasn't in the room. It felt like he was conditioning her, rewarding her for complying with his demands. 28 hours after her kidnapping, Denise woke up in bed to find him there again. He informed her that they had lost contact with Aaron because the police had put his phone in airplane mode. This news was devastating. It meant that Aaron couldn't help her anymore, raising fears for her safety. The kidnapper then told Denise that his associates were on their way to discuss their next move and instructed her to pretend to be asleep because they weren't as nice as he was. She strained to listen to the conversation outside the room but could only make out strained voices filled with tension. Once the other men left, the kidnapper returned and said they needed to record a proof-of-life message for authorities. This would be the audio clip sent via email later. He claimed that the footage from yesterday looked too forced, so they needed to have sex again, this time making it appear as if they were in a consensual relationship. He suggested taping her eyes shut to make it look like she was simply closing them. Denise felt trapped. She feared that this time she wouldn't be able to detach emotionally from what was happening. After enduring another horrific assault, she fell asleep again. In the middle of the night, her kidnapper woke her and told her he wanted to show her something. Lifting her goggles just enough to see his phone, he showed her a video of her father speaking to the media about her disappearance, the first time Denise had seen or heard from anyone outside since being taken. This moment broke Denise down into tears, making everything painfully real for the first time since her abduction. The kidnapper remarked, "It must feel real now," but all Denise could muster was a defiant curse directed at him. He then told her it was time to go home. They got into a car together, and he explained that he couldn't return to the Bay Area due to law enforcement's presence but would take her back to Huntington Beach, where her family lived. As they drove, Denise woke up in the front seat with her eyes taped shut. She couldn't see any details of their surroundings except for a white exterior on the car. The kidnapper warned her that he knew she would talk to the police and instructed her not to mention any members of his kidnapping ring who might have connections to law enforcement or military service. He insisted that she couldn't disclose that they had sex during her captivity. His chilling threats made it clear, if she broke any of these rules, they would always be watching and could harm her family. When they arrived near her father's house, he told her to count to 10 after hearing the car pull away before removing the tape from her eyes. After counting down, Denise peeled off the tape and realized she was on a street familiar from countless childhood memories, just blocks away from where she had grown up. She rushed toward her father's door, but he wasn't home. A neighbor noticed something was wrong and came out to help. They quickly called both Mike Huskins and the police for assistance. The fact that Denise's kidnapper knew where her father lived added an unsettling layer of fear. It implied that his threats were credible because he had tracked down their home address. Instead of dropping her off in an isolated area far from law enforcement, he brought her back into familiar territory, a calculated move designed to instill fear and assert control over her. As memories of playing in that neighborhood flooded back, Denise faced an overwhelming emotional struggle after everything she had endured. She now had to figure out how to reach out for help while grappling with trauma and fear for both herself and her family. The journey back home was supposed to be a relief, but instead became a complex mix of emotions as Denise confronted not only what had happened but also what lay ahead in reclaiming her life after such a horrific experience. Denise Huskins emerged from her traumatic ordeal with an incredible strength that inspired many. Her ability to articulate her experiences and memories was remarkable. Even in footage of her being dropped off, she appeared calm and collected, a demeanor that, unfortunately, was later used against her. Many questioned how someone could remain so composed after such a harrowing experience, especially considering she had been drugged during her captivity. When Denise was finally rescued, she found herself surrounded by the chaos of media, helicopters, and crowds outside her home. As she recounted the details of her kidnapping to the police, they asked if she had been sexually assaulted. Fearing the repercussions of telling the truth, she hesitated and said no. It was at this moment that the police informed her about a proffer agreement from the Vallejo Police Department, which would grant her immunity. This revelation hit Denise hard. It became clear that instead of treating her as a victim, they were viewing her as a suspect in a fabricated story. Denise later wrote a book detailing her experience, where she clarified misconceptions about her appearance when she was dropped off. Surveillance footage showed her walking down the street with a green duffel bag and wearing sunglasses, items that raised questions since she had been taken from her home without those belongings. In her book, Denise explained that before leaving the house during her abduction, the kidnapper had forced her to pack a duffel bag with personal items and had given her the sunglasses. Realizing how serious the situation was and feeling like a suspect rather than a victim, Denise contacted attorney Douglas Rappaport. He advised her not to make any more statements and instructed her to fly directly to him in the Bay Area, warning that if she contradicted any previous statements, it could be used against her. When the FBI offered to fly her on their plane, Rappaport firmly declined, insisting that she should not go anywhere with them. On the way to the airport, Denise became acutely aware of the media frenzy surrounding her case. The treatment of both Denise and Aaron by law enforcement and the media played a crucial role in how their story unfolded. Initially, Aaron was seen as the primary suspect. Detective Mustard and FBI agent Peter French confronted him directly, expressing their belief that he was a monster. However, after Denise's release, law enforcement shifted their focus entirely onto her. Lieutenant Kenny Park held a press conference shortly after she was freed and publicly accused both Denise and Aaron of fabricating their entire ordeal. His statements were shocking. He no longer referred to them as victims or witnesses but instead framed them as perpetrators of a hoax. In his press conference, Lieutenant Park confirmed that Aaron Quinn had reported Denise's abduction early on Sunday morning by unknown assailants demanding ransom money. However, there was confusion regarding the ransom amount. While Park stated it was $8,500, the actual demand was for $88,500, aimed at avoiding a paper trail at banks for large withdrawals. The police's dismissive attitude toward Aaron's account added to the chaos surrounding the case. Lieutenant Park claimed they initially struggled to believe Aaron's story but concluded that they could not substantiate any of his claims after further investigation. As Denise grappled with the aftermath of her kidnapping and the media storm that followed, it became evident how deeply flawed the investigation had been. Instead of focusing on finding justice for Denise and Aaron, law enforcement turned their attention toward discrediting them, an approach that left both victims feeling betrayed by those who were supposed to protect them. Despite the overwhelming evidence law enforcement claimed to possess, they never charged Denise Huskins or her boyfriend, Aaron Quinn. Instead, they publicly slandered them, calling them monsters to their faces while failing to file any charges. If they were so confident in their narrative, one might wonder why they didn't pursue legal action against them. The media quickly concluded that Denise was a hoaxer, and news crews soon cleared out of Vallejo. Just days after the police press conference, Henry Lee received another email from an unknown sender claiming to be the kidnapper. This email detailed the kidnapping ring he was part of and likened them to the crew from Ocean's 11. It included photos of firearms with attached laser pointers and flashlights. The email concluded with a demand for a public apology from the Vallejo Police Department to both Denise and Aaron, threatening that they would strike again if their demands were not met. This unexpected communication made Henry question whether they had misjudged the situation. It was intriguing that the kidnapper seemed to have developed a bond with Denise, enough to risk sending an email demanding an apology. It raised questions about his motives. Was he seeking notoriety or genuinely offended by how the police were portraying the events? On June 5, 2015, 10 weeks after Denise's release, officers in Dublin, California, responded to a 911 call about a kidnapping in progress. The caller was a woman who had hidden in the bathroom while her husband fought with an intruder who had entered their home in the middle of the night. The intruder had instructed them to take sedatives and was attempting to abduct their 22-year-old daughter. In a brave move, the father fought back against the kidnapper, causing him to flee. When police arrived at the scene, they discovered zip ties, duct tape, and sedatives left behind by the intruder. Although there were miles of fields surrounding the neighborhood, making it nearly impossible for tracker dogs to locate him, officers found a phone in the house that appeared to belong to the kidnapper. Using this phone, police called 911 to ask for information about its owner, a move that was technically illegal since they hadn't procured a search warrant first. They traced the phone back to Matthew Muller, a former Marine and disbarred attorney who had attended Harvard. Muller's mother informed authorities that he was staying at their family cabin in South Lake Tahoe. Recognizing him as a potential suspect due to his history of criminal behavior, including multiple allegations of sexual assault, police moved quickly. They approached his cabin cautiously to avoid alerting him and potentially allowing him to escape. Fortunately, law enforcement managed to break down the door and arrest Muller without incident. Body camera footage from the arrest showed him remaining calm and composed throughout the encounter, an unsettling demeanor considering his alleged crimes. Inside his cabin, officers found evidence linking him directly to Denise's kidnapping: zip ties, duct tape, water guns painted black to resemble firearms with lasers taped on them, bottles of NyQuil, and syringes. They also discovered a stolen white Mustang parked nearby with Muller's ID inside. The car's GPS revealed it had traveled from Vallejo to various locations, including Las Vegas and Huntington Beach. In a chilling discovery, officers opened the trunk of Muller's vehicle and found a blow-up sex doll stuffed inside a canvas bag designed to resemble a human body. Additionally, they found blacked-out swim goggles with a single strand of blonde hair still attached, a detail that Detective Misty Caruso fixated on as she wondered whose hair it could be. As investigators began piecing together evidence connecting Muller to both Denise's kidnapping and other crimes across California, it became clear that he had acted alone in this series of brazen offenses. After Muller's arrest, Denise and Aaron received letters of apology from Vallejo Police Chief Andrew Bidu. The letters acknowledged that their earlier statements had been unnecessarily harsh and offensive. It is now clear that there was a kidnapping on March 23, 2015, Bidu wrote. It was not a hoax or orchestrated event. In light of these developments, Denise and Aaron filed a federal lawsuit against the Vallejo Police Department for defamation and emotional distress due to how they were treated during the investigation. They argued that because of the police's unfounded allegations regarding Denise's kidnapping, they were forced to leave their hometown, where they had worked as physical therapists. Matthew Muller was held in solitary confinement for a year before his trial, with authorities hoping his mental state would deteriorate enough for him to confess to acting alone in the kidnapping of Denise Huskins. During an off-the-record conversation with a reporter, Muller admitted to the kidnapping, but this discussion was recorded and subsequently sent to the FBI, who used the information to pressure him into accepting a plea deal. In a jailhouse interview conducted by Henry Lee, Mueller had already accepted the plea deal and was awaiting sentencing. He expressed outrage over how the police had handled the case, particularly their decision to label Denise and Aaron as hoaxers. "I'm certainly outraged, as everybody should be, by the conduct of the police," he stated, criticizing their treatment of the victims during the investigation. Mueller discussed his relationship with his wife, whom he had dated before his arrest. He explained that they had a complicated history, but she had stood by him even after he was charged. Despite acknowledging his actions, he maintained a certain level of detachment when discussing the case. He claimed to feel guilty about how the Vallejo Police Department had handled the situation, believing it was important for him to take responsibility and ensure justice for Denise and Aaron. This statement raised eyebrows. It seemed contradictory for someone who had committed such serious crimes to express concern for his victims. As Mueller spoke, it became evident that he articulated himself well, almost like a lawyer. He navigated the conversation carefully, trying not to incriminate himself while acknowledging what had occurred. His calm and composed demeanor sharply contrasted with the horrific nature of his actions. In the arrest affidavit, Mueller informed authorities that he suffered from Gulf War illness and had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. While his mental health struggles were significant factors in understanding his behavior, they did not excuse his actions. Mueller ultimately pleaded guilty to federal kidnapping charges and received a 40-year prison sentence. During the sentencing hearing, U.S. District Judge Troy L. Nunley addressed Mueller's actions directly, stating that the sentence reflected the egregiousness of his conduct. He noted that Mueller had advantages in life that most people only dream of, yet he chose to use his intelligence to plan and execute the physical assault and psychological torture of two innocent victims. Mueller's demeanor during the trial was unsettling. He presented himself as composed and articulate, which sharply contrasted with the horrific nature of his crimes. This behavior did not surprise those familiar with his background as a Harvard graduate and former Marine, qualities that suggested a calculated approach rather than impulsive actions. In 2022, Mueller was sentenced to an additional 31 years in prison after pleading no contest to 2 counts of forcible rape and guilty to 3 other charges in Solano County Superior Court. This state sentence would run concurrently with his federal sentence. As of 2024, Mueller is serving his time at the Federal Correctional Institution in Tucson, Arizona, with a scheduled release date of July 8, 2049. By then, he will be in his 70s. Debate arose regarding his eligibility for parole during his sentence. Some argued that, given the severity of his crimes, particularly those requiring significant physical exertion, his age might limit any future risk he posed to society. Others firmly believed that anyone capable of such violence should not be granted leniency or a chance at freedom. Meanwhile, Denise continued to rebuild her life after her traumatic experience, facing not only the challenges of healing but also an ongoing battle against public perception fueled by misinformation and bias from authorities. Her resilience became evident as she fought for justice, not just for herself but also for others who might find themselves in similar situations, a testament to her strength in overcoming adversity against all odds. Through it all, Denise Huskins emerged as someone determined to reclaim her narrative after enduring such trauma and facing unjust accusations. Her journey highlighted systemic flaws within law enforcement's handling of missing persons cases and underscored how quickly they could turn against victims instead of seeking justice for them. As for Detective Mustard, one would hope that such a significant failure in handling the case would end his career. Instead, he was awarded Officer of the Year in 2015 for his detective work. This recognition felt like a slap in the face to Denise and Aaron after everything they had endured, appearing to be an attempt by law enforcement to save face rather than acknowledge their mistakes. Further investigations into Mustard's past revealed troubling allegations against him. In 2012, he reportedly pressured a forensic pathologist to change an autopsy report in a murder case and faced accusations of withholding evidence in 2020. Additionally, in 2021, he was investigated due to allegations of racism, yet he continued to hold a significant position within the Vallejo Police Department as the sergeant of their investigative division. Henry Lee from the San Francisco Chronicle, who had previously reported on Denise's case, later expressed regret for framing her as a hoaxer. Meanwhile, Matthew's marriage faced turmoil. His wife filed for divorce in 2022, though they remained legally married at that time. In light of these revelations and the harm caused by false accusations, Denise and Aaron decided to take legal action against the Vallejo Police Department for defamation in 2016. They were awarded $2.5 million for their suffering, a significant acknowledgement of their ordeal and a step toward justice. They moved forward with their lives. Denise and Aaron remained committed to sharing their story, hoping it would resonate with anyone who has experienced trauma and inspire change within a system that often fails its victims. Aaron and Denise Huskins firmly believe that the trauma they endured during Denise's kidnapping warranted far more than the $2.5 million awarded to them in their defamation lawsuit against the Vallejo Police Department. It took 6 long years for the department to issue an apology, which only came after a complete change in leadership. This delay in acknowledgement was not just hurtful, it affected Denise and Aaron on multiple levels, personally, professionally, and socially. Many people only heard about the alleged hoax and were unaware of the truth behind their ordeal, leaving a lasting stain on their reputations. Muna Pandey was born into a world filled with love and hope in a small town in Nepal. Growing up, she shared a close bond with her mother, Anita, who had escaped an abusive relationship with Muna's father. Anita worked tirelessly to provide for her daughter, instilling values of hard work, kindness, and determination. Muna learned from her mother that education was the key to a better life, and she dreamed of becoming a nurse to help others. Inspired by the stories of local healthcare workers who made a difference in their communities, Muna aspired to follow in their footsteps, believing that she could bring healing and comfort to those in need. From a young age, Muna was fascinated by the idea of caring for others. She often played doctor with her friends, bandaging their pretend injuries and comforting them when they were sick. Her role models were the nurses she saw in her village, compassionate women who dedicated their lives to helping others. Their selflessness sparked a fire in Muna's heart, one that would guide her through challenges and shape her ambitions. When the opportunity arose to study in the United States, Muna faced a tough decision. She was excited but also scared about leaving her home and everything she knew behind. The thought of living in a new country filled her with both hope and anxiety. However, driven by her dreams and the sacrifices her mother had made for her education, she decided to take the leap. Anita had raised money from their community to support Muna's journey, believing wholeheartedly that this move would lead to a brighter future for them both. Upon arriving in Houston, Texas, Muna was struck by the city's vastness and diversity. The tall buildings seemed to touch the sky, and the people were bustling about with purpose. At first, everything felt overwhelming. The noise of traffic, the fast-paced lifestyle, and the unfamiliar faces made her feel small. Yet, Muna was determined to adapt. She quickly found comfort in the warmth of fellow students from Nepal who welcomed her into their circle. They shared meals together and celebrated their culture through festivals that reminded them of home. However, adjusting to life in America wasn't easy. Muna faced many challenges, learning to navigate public transportation, managing her finances on a tight budget, and balancing work with her studies at Houston Community College. She worked at a local restaurant while taking classes during the day. Her typical day was filled with long hours. She would wake up early to study before heading to work and would often return home late at night exhausted but proud of her efforts. Despite these challenges, Muna found joy in her friendships. She formed close bonds with fellow students who shared similar backgrounds and aspirations. They supported each other through tough times, studying together for exams and sharing laughter over meals cooked from their native recipes. One friend recalled how they celebrated small victories together. Whether it was acing an exam or simply making it through a tough week, they cheered each other on. Muna's kindness shone through even during difficult times. She volunteered at local events to help newcomers from Nepal adjust to life in America. Her friends admired her ability to make everyone feel included, She had an infectious smile that could light up any room. One memorable moment was when she organized a small gathering for students during the Dashine Festival, a significant celebration back home, bringing everyone together for food and laughter, reminding them of their roots. As part of the Nepalese community in Houston, Muna actively participated in cultural events that celebrated their heritage. During one such festival, she took on the role of organizing activities for children, teaching them traditional dances and songs. This involvement gave her a sense of belonging and purpose. She loved sharing her culture with others while creating lasting memories. However, beneath Muna's bright exterior lay moments of vulnerability that tested her spirit. There were times when she felt homesick or overwhelmed by the pressures of school and work. Yet each time she faced adversity, she found strength within herself, drawing courage from her mother's sacrifices and unwavering belief in her dreams. But not all experiences were positive. Muna encountered unsettling situations that left her feeling unsafe. One night, after finishing work late at the restaurant, she noticed someone following her home, a shadowy figure lurking just out of sight. The fear gripped her heart as she hurriedly entered her apartment building. That incident marked the beginning of a troubling chapter in Muna's life. It made her realize that not everyone had good intentions. In response to this fear, Muna took proactive steps to protect herself. She installed security cameras outside her apartment door and shared her concerns with friends who offered support and reassurance. Although these incidents created distance between some relationships due to worry from loved ones back home, many rallied around Muna, offering comfort during those dark moments. As time went on, Muna remained focused on achieving her dreams despite these challenges. She envisioned using her nursing degree not just as a job but as a way to uplift those around her, especially women like her mother who had fought against adversity for so long. Little did anyone know that this vibrant young woman's journey would take a tragic turn that no one could have predicted. On the evening of August 24, 2024, the air in Houston was thick with humidity, typical for a late summer night in Texas. The sun had just dipped below the horizon, casting a warm orange glow over the city. Muna Pandey was returning home after a long day at work, her mind filled with thoughts of her studies and dreams for the future. She lived in an apartment complex called The Reserve, located at 6363 West Airport Boulevard. The neighborhood had its charm, with friendly faces and a sense of community that made her feel somewhat at home. However, there were also shadows lurking in the corners, places where danger could hide. Muna's apartment was cozy but modest. She had taken care to make it feel safe, installing security cameras and double-locking her door each night. Despite these precautions, she often felt uneasy, especially after noticing someone lingering around her workplace. That person was Bobby Singh Shah, a man who had crossed paths with Muna several times before. Their interactions had always been brief and unremarkable. He would occasionally come into the restaurant where she worked, making small talk that left her feeling uncomfortable. Muna confided in friends about her unease regarding Shah, expressing concerns that he seemed overly interested in her life. Bobby Shah was 51 years old and had a complicated past. He had been known to frequent bars and had a history of troubling behavior that raised red flags among those who knew him. Friends of Muna speculated that he may have been following her home from work, as she had mentioned feeling watched on multiple occasions. They could not have imagined how dangerous this would become. As the clock struck 9:48 p.m., CCTV footage captured the chilling moment when Shah approached Muna outside her apartment. The video showed him lingering near her door, his expression unreadable as he waited for her to arrive. Muna walked into view, her face brightening at the sight of home after a long day. But that moment of relief quickly turned to fear as Shah confronted her with a gun drawn. The footage revealed Muna's shock. Her eyes widened in disbelief as she realized the gravity of the situation. In those harrowing moments captured on camera, Muna's emotional state shifted from surprise to terror. She instinctively tried to retreat but found herself trapped in a nightmare. Witnesses later described hearing muffled sounds coming from the apartment, shouts or perhaps cries for help, but no one knew what was happening behind closed doors. Neighbors recalled feeling an unsettling tension in the air that night but were too afraid to intervene. After hours passed without any sign of Muna, concern began to grow among her friends and family. They hadn't heard from her since Saturday evening when her phone stopped pinging its location. Friends started calling and texting but received no response. Panic set in as they realized something was wrong. They reached out to each other, sharing their worries about Muna's safety and recalling how she had expressed fear about being followed. On August 26, 2024, the body of Muna Pandey was discovered in her apartment after an anonymous tip was received by the staff at the Reserve apartment complex. The caller, a male voice with no caller ID, conveyed alarming information, stating that there was a body inside one of the units. This unsettling message prompted immediate action from the management, who decided to check on Muna's apartment. They had not heard from her for days and were concerned about her well-being. Upon receiving the call, the management quickly gathered a small team and headed to Muna's apartment. They knocked on the door but received no response. After a few tense moments, they decided to enter using a spare key. What they found inside would change everything. The staff members were horrified to discover Muna's lifeless body in her bedroom. They immediately contacted the authorities to report their grim findings. The timeline from the anonymous call to the arrival of Houston police was swift but filled with tension. Within minutes of the call, officers were dispatched to the reserve. They arrived at the scene approximately 20 minutes later, ready to assess what had unfolded in the apartment. As they entered, their initial assessment revealed a chilling scene that hinted at foul play. Upon entering Muna's apartment, officers noted the disarray within. The living space was eerily quiet, and their first observations indicated something was terribly wrong. Muna lay on her bed, and it was evident that she had been shot multiple times. The sight was tragic and haunting. Her body showed signs of violence that would later be confirmed as gunshot wounds. Muna's body was found with 4 gunshot wounds, 3 in her torso and 1 in the back of her head, described as an execution-style shot by prosecutors. This detail indicated a brutal and deliberate act rather than a random act of violence or robbery gone wrong. The nature of these injuries suggested a calculated intention behind her murder, leaving investigators with many questions about what had transpired in those final moments. The condition of Muna's apartment also raised alarms about a potential struggle. Although there were no signs of forced entry, which led investigators to believe she may have known her attacker, there were items out of place that suggested a confrontation had occurred. Personal belongings like her purse and shopping bags were scattered around, indicating chaos during the incident. Forensic teams arrived shortly after law enforcement to document the crime scene meticulously. They used various methods to collect evidence, including photographs and sketches that would later aid in building a case against whoever was responsible for this heinous act. The forensic team also ensured that every piece of evidence was carefully cataloged for analysis. Security footage from outside Muna's apartment played a crucial role in piecing together the events leading up to her murder. This footage captured Bobby Singh Shah approaching Muna just moments before she was forced inside her home at gunpoint. The video showed him directing Muna to open her door while she expressed fear and confusion about what he intended to do. As investigators began their work, they also prepared for an autopsy to confirm details about Muna's injuries and establish a timeline for her death. Conducted by the Harris County Institute of Forensic Sciences, the autopsy aimed to provide clarity on how long Muna had been deceased and any additional findings that could assist in the investigation. The autopsy revealed critical information about Muna's gunshot wounds. The entry and exit points were documented meticulously by forensic experts. They confirmed that she had been shot 4 times, with specific details regarding each wound's location contributing to understanding how she died. Toxicology reports were also part of the autopsy process. However, they did not reveal anything unusual about Muna's state at the time of death, suggesting she had not been under the influence of drugs or alcohol when attacked. Additionally, forensic experts noted no defensive wounds on her body, indicating that she may not have had time to react or defend herself against her assailant. As investigators continued their work following this tragic discovery, they released surveillance images showing Bobby Singh Shah exiting Muna's apartment 2 days before her body was found. This release prompted numerous tips from the public that helped solidify his connection to the crime. The investigation into Muna Pandey's murder was just beginning, but each new piece of evidence brought them closer to uncovering the truth behind this heartbreaking tragedy. A young woman whose life had been cut short far too soon would not be forgotten as justice sought its course. In the wake of Muna Pandey's tragic death, investigators faced a daunting task. The initial stages of the investigation were marked by significant challenges that complicated their efforts to find justice. One of the most pressing issues was the lack of physical evidence at the crime scene. While Muna's apartment had been disturbed, crucial evidence like a clear murder weapon or definitive signs of a struggle were missing. This absence made it difficult for law enforcement to establish a concrete timeline or motive, leading to frustration among the detectives assigned to the case. Moreover, investigators encountered uncooperative witnesses in the neighborhood. Many residents were hesitant to speak up, fearing potential repercussions from getting involved in a violent crime. Some neighbors reported hearing muffled sounds during the confrontation but were reluctant to provide detailed accounts, worried that they might become targets themselves. This reluctance created barriers that hindered the investigation, leaving detectives with only fragmented information. The local community's feelings toward law enforcement further complicated matters. Many residents, particularly within the Nepalese community, had a deep-seated distrust of police due to past experiences and cultural barriers. Some felt that law enforcement did not understand their concerns or cultural nuances, which led to reluctance in cooperating with the investigation. This dynamic created an atmosphere of suspicion and fear, making it challenging for authorities to gather vital information. Despite these hurdles, key pieces of evidence began to emerge. The CCTV footage from the reserve proved pivotal in identifying Bobby Singh Shah as a suspect. The grainy images captured moments leading up to Muna's confrontation with him outside her apartment. Viewers could see Shah approaching her with an unsettling demeanor, his body language indicating aggression as he forced her inside. This footage became a crucial element in establishing his presence at the scene and helped detectives piece together the timeline of events. Forensic evidence collected from Muna's apartment also played a significant role in linking Shah to the crime. Investigators found fingerprints on surfaces near where Muna was attacked, and DNA samples were collected from various locations within the apartment. These findings would later match Shah's profile, solidifying his connection to the horrific act. Witness statements began to trickle in as well, providing additional context for investigators. Neighbors reported seeing Shah loitering around the complex in the days leading up to Muna's death. Some recalled seeing him leave her apartment shortly after the shots were fired, while others described hearing what they thought were arguments or distressing sounds coming from within her home. These accounts helped build a clearer timeline and painted a picture of Shah's suspicious behavior. Bobby Singh Shah was a 51-year-old man with a troubled past. Living alone and working sporadically as a handyman, he had previously been known for erratic behavior and had run-ins with law enforcement over minor offenses. Friends described him as someone who often lingered around places where young women worked, an unsettling detail that raised red flags among those who knew him. While it is unclear how well they knew each other prior to the incident, court documents and witness accounts suggest that Shah had been a familiar presence in Muna's life, particularly through his frequent visits to the restaurant where she had previously worked. He was known for leaving generous tips for the women who served him, which may have contributed to his perceived friendliness, but this facade masked a darker reality. The investigation revealed that Shah was linked to sugar daddy websites, where older men often seek relationships with younger women, sometimes in exchange for financial support. A woman who recognized Shah from such a site contacted police after seeing his image in surveillance footage. She claimed to have met him over a decade ago through a sugar daddy platform, which raised concerns about Shah's potential predatory behavior. This connection suggested that he may have been targeting Muna through similar means, possibly viewing her as another young woman who could be manipulated or coerced. While there was no direct evidence of a prior relationship between Muna and Shah, their paths had crossed at her workplace on several occasions. He had shown interest in her during casual conversations at the restaurant where she worked part-time. However, Muna had always kept interactions brief and professional. As investigators dug deeper into his background, they uncovered troubling patterns of behavior that suggested he may have been fixated on her. Shah's criminal history revealed previous complaints about harassment from women who had encountered him in public spaces. This pattern of behavior painted a disturbing picture and influenced public perception of him as someone who posed a threat, especially after Muna's tragic death became widely known. Muna had expressed fears about being stalked prior to her murder, prompting her to install security cameras outside her apartment. This precaution reflected her awareness of the dangers she faced as an international student living alone in a foreign country. Her friends noted that she had been uncomfortable with Shah's attention and had mentioned feeling uneasy about his presence. However, it appears that she may not have fully understood the extent of the threat he posed until it was too late. On the night of August 24, 2024, the situation escalated dramatically when Shah confronted Muna outside her apartment. CCTV footage captured him forcing her inside at gunpoint after a brief exchange where she asked, "What are you going to do?" This chilling moment highlighted the power dynamics at play. Muna was clearly frightened and confused, while Shah wielded control through intimidation. The nature of their interactions, coupled with Shah's history linked to sugar daddy websites, paints a disturbing picture of how he may have viewed Muna. It raises questions about whether he had been stalking her or if he had developed an unhealthy fixation on her as someone he could dominate. The violent culmination of their encounter resulted in Muna being shot multiple times, including an execution-style shot to the back of her head, indicating a calculated act rather than a spontaneous crime. The revelation of Shah's potential connections to sugar daddy platforms not only complicates the narrative surrounding Muna's murder but also highlights broader issues regarding safety for young women, particularly international students who may be vulnerable in unfamiliar environments. The community's shock and grief over Muna's death have sparked discussions about the need for better protections and resources for students navigating these complex social dynamics. As investigators continue to unravel the details surrounding this tragic case, the relationship between Muna and Shah serves as a grim reminder of how quickly seemingly innocuous interactions can escalate into violence. As investigators worked tirelessly to identify Shah, they released images from the surveillance footage to the public. This move proved pivotal. Within hours, tips began pouring in. One significant lead came from a restaurant owner who recognized Shah as a frequent patron at a local establishment where Muna had previously worked. He provided police with copies of Shah's Texas driver's license and contact information. Another crucial tip came from a woman who had met Shah through a sugar daddy website years earlier. She recognized him immediately upon seeing his image in connection with Muna's case. Her testimony raised alarms about Shah's potential predatory behavior and suggested he may have targeted Muna through similar means. On August 30, 2024, law enforcement acted decisively based on the tips received and the evidence gathered from the surveillance footage. Officers apprehended Bobby Singh Shah during a routine traffic stop. As they approached his vehicle, they were filled with anticipation. This was the moment they had been working towards since Muna's tragic death. Shah did not resist arrest but remained silent as officers took him into custody. Upon searching his vehicle, authorities found a firearm that matched the type used in Muna's murder and noticed bloodstains on his clothing consistent with what he had been seen wearing in the surveillance footage. After Bobby Singh Shah was arrested, the investigation transitioned into a critical phase focused on building a strong case for the upcoming trial. Detectives worked tirelessly to gather all available evidence, ensuring that every detail surrounding Muna Pandey's tragic death was meticulously documented. The community held its breath, hoping for justice while grappling with the profound loss of a vibrant young woman whose life had been cut short. In the days following Shah's arrest, forensic teams conducted thorough analyses of the evidence collected from both Muna's apartment and Shah's vehicle. The firearm found in Shah's possession was sent for ballistic testing to confirm whether it matched the bullets recovered from Muna's body. Investigators also examined Shah's clothing for additional forensic evidence, such as DNA or blood that would further link him to the crime. The meticulous work of forensic experts was essential in solidifying the prosecution's case against him. As the investigation progressed, Muna's friends and family organized vigils and memorials in her honor. These gatherings served as a powerful reminder of her life and legacy, allowing those who knew her to come together in grief and solidarity. The community rallied around Muna's family, providing emotional support while also advocating for justice. Social media campaigns emerged, calling for awareness about safety issues faced by international students and urging local authorities to implement measures that would protect vulnerable individuals. Meanwhile, as the legal proceedings began, the prosecution prepared to present its case against Shah. They gathered a wealth of evidence, including the CCTV footage that captured his confrontation with Muna, witness statements that corroborated his presence near her apartment, and forensic findings that linked him directly to the murder. The prosecution aimed to establish a clear timeline leading up to Muna's death, emphasizing Shah's aggressive behavior and intent. Shah's defense team, on the other hand, sought to challenge the prosecution's narrative. They argued that there was insufficient evidence to prove premeditated murder and attempted to paint a picture of Shah as someone who had acted out of desperation rather than malice. They raised questions about whether Shah had truly intended to kill Muna or if he had been provoked during their encounter. As the trial date approached, emotions ran high within the community. Muna's family attended every pre-trial hearing, determined to seek justice for their beloved daughter. Friends shared stories about her kindness and ambition, reminding everyone that she was not just a victim but a young woman with dreams of becoming a nurse, someone who wanted to help others. When the trial finally began, it drew significant media attention. News outlets reported on the proceedings extensively, highlighting the impact of Muna's death on her community and raising awareness about issues of safety for young women living alone. The courtroom was often filled with supporters wearing shirts emblazoned with Muna's image, showing solidarity with her family as they navigated this painful journey. During the trial, emotional testimonies from friends and family painted a vivid picture of who Muna was, a compassionate individual who brought joy to those around her. They spoke about her aspirations and how she had dedicated herself to her studies in nursing. As days turned into weeks during the trial proceedings, everyone remained hopeful that justice would prevail for Muna Pandey, a young woman whose life had been cut short far too soon but whose legacy continued to inspire change within her community. The quest for justice was not just about punishing one man, it was about ensuring that no other family would have to endure such heartache again. On the day of the verdict announcement, tension filled the air as everyone awaited the jury's decision. After several hours of deliberation, they returned to the courtroom. The foreperson stood up, and with a steady voice declared, "We find the defendant guilty of capital murder." A wave of emotion swept through the courtroom. Muna's family and friends embraced one another, tears streaming down their faces as they felt a mixture of relief and sorrow. Justice had been served, but it could never bring back their beloved Muna. The verdict resonated throughout the community. It was a testament to their collective grief and determination to honor her memory. In the aftermath of the verdict, Bobby Singh Shah faced sentencing. The judge announced that he would receive life in prison without parole, a fitting consequence for his actions that had irrevocably changed so many lives. During the sentencing hearing, Muna's mother, Anita Pandey, delivered a heartbreaking statement about her daughter's dreams and aspirations. She expressed her deep sorrow over losing her only child and urged for maximum punishment for Shah. With Shah now behind bars, discussions about safety for international students intensified within Houston and beyond. Community leaders began advocating for better protective measures and resources for students living alone.
Grace Millane was a bright and adventurous 21-year-old who had just finished university. Excited to explore the world, she traveled to New Zealand. One evening, she went on a date with a local man she met on Tinder. They laughed, kissed, and enjoyed each other's company, but after that night, Grace vanished without a trace. CCTV footage showed the man taking Grace back to his hotel room, but the next morning, he left alone with a suitcase. This shocking event led to the heartbreaking story of Grace Millane's tragic fate. Her murder sent waves of sadness around the globe, leaving everyone wondering what had happened to the young woman full of dreams. Grace Millane was born on December 2, 1996, to her loving parents, Jillian and David, and had two older brothers, Declan and Michael. Their family was very close and always happy together. Grace grew up in a big family, with her dad being one of 10 siblings, which meant she had lots of cousins to play with. Her dad was a successful builder, and they lived in what they called their dream home. Grace was a creative spirit, full of talent in art. She loved to paint and draw, sharing her beautiful creations on her Instagram account called Art by Millane. The last picture she posted was a painting of a skull, with a mysterious caption. "Two can keep a secret if one of them is dead." It was a strange hint of the sadness that was about to unfold in her life. Little did anyone know that this bright and talented girl was about to face a terrible fate. Just less than 2 months later, Grace was ready to explore the world. She had graduated from the University of Lincoln with a degree in advertising and marketing. Excited to spread her wings, she looked back fondly on her time at university, where she made great friends and played lots of hockey. Grace loved sports, especially hockey, and was an active member of the hockey club. In October 2018, her parents took her to the airport, and off she went on her solo backpacking adventure. Traveling alone is a big deal for many people, even if it's not for everyone. Some prefer the comforts of home, like a hair dryer and a microwave. But Grace was thrilled to be far away from everything she knew, ready to learn how to live and communicate in new places. Grace was excited about her journey, knowing she would grow as a person and meet many interesting people along the way. She loved making new friends and felt confident she would connect with others during her travels. After flying out in October, she planned to return to England in June for a family wedding, making her trip about 9 months long. Her first stop was Peru in South America. Grace told her family how thrilled she was to visit chocolate factories, as that region produced half of the world's chocolate. She also wanted to see the ancient city of Machu Picchu, which required a challenging 5-day hike. Grace joined a trekking group and made wonderful friends during the climb. When they reached the top, they celebrated with a group photo. Even though Grace was having a fantastic time, she made sure to stay in touch with her family. Her dad wanted to hear from her every day, whether through texts, FaceTime, or pictures of her adventures. It brought them comfort to know she was safe and enjoying her travels. Grace was having the time of her life, but her family back home was a bit worried. Traveling alone as a young woman in a foreign country can be exciting but also dangerous. Grace knew she had to be careful and stay aware of her surroundings. There are people who might try to take advantage of solo travelers, especially women, because they might not know the area well. Despite the risks, Grace was part of a hiking group, and they looked out for each other. She enjoyed her time in Peru, but soon it was time for her next adventure in New Zealand. She arrived in Auckland on November 20th, ready to explore the beautiful country, starting with the North Island. Grace was excited to continue her journey, but little did she know that this is where her story would take a tragic turn. Grace spent some time island hopping in New Zealand, exploring beautiful places with white sandy beaches and sparkling blue waters. After 10 days of adventure, she returned to Auckland on November 30th and checked into Base Backpackers Hostel, a popular spot for travelers like her. The hostel had cozy dorms with bunk beds, a kitchen, and laundry facilities, making it a perfect place for Grace to rest and recharge. She planned to stay for a few days before heading back out to explore more islands. In the city, she could leave her backpack behind and enjoy city life, which was very different from her island adventures. To make the most of her time, Grace wanted to meet locals who could help her discover the best spots in the city. She was excited for all the new experiences ahead. Grace was excited to meet someone new, thinking it could be a fun holiday romance. After all, she had been traveling for a while, and her 22nd birthday was just around the corner on December 2nd. She didn't want to celebrate alone, so she turned to Tinder, feeling confident after having some successful dates back in the UK. On November 30th, she matched with a man on the app, and the very next day, on her birthday eve, they planned to meet for a date. It seemed a bit quick to match one night and meet the next, but Grace was only in the city for a short time, so she went for it. On December 1st, Grace didn't respond to any messages or calls from her family, which was unusual for her. They were likely trying to reach her to wish her a happy birthday, but with the time difference, New Zealand being 14 hours ahead, they might not have worried right away. They hoped she was just having too much fun to check her phone. Sadly, they would soon learn that something terrible had happened. As the days went by, Grace's family grew increasingly worried. It was her birthday on December 2nd, and they thought she might just be busy celebrating and enjoying her time. But when December 3rd arrived and Grace still hadn't replied to any messages, panic set in. This was not like their Grace. By December 4th, her family decided to report her missing to the police in Auckland. Grace's case quickly became a top priority for the authorities. A young woman traveling alone in a foreign country was missing, and they feared she might be in danger. Her picture was shared everywhere, on newspapers, news websites, and social media. Everyone was looking for Grace, hoping to find her safe. But deep down, they feared something terrible had happened. Many people remember the story of Grace Millane. It was a big case that caught everyone's attention. Just a few days into the investigation, on December 7th, Grace's father, David Millane, flew all the way from the UK to New Zealand. It took over 24 hours of travel. When he arrived, he joined the police to make a public appeal for Grace's safe return. He pleaded with people to remember anything from the night of December 1st that might help find her. New Zealand is known for being very safe, ranked as the 4th safest country in the world in 2023. So, everyone was shocked that a young woman could just disappear from the middle of a city. Luckily, Auckland had many CCTV cameras, which would play a big role in the investigation. The police first checked the cameras at Base Backpackers, the hostel where Grace had been staying. They found footage of her leaving for the last time, and this was just the beginning of the search for answers. On the evening of December 1st, Grace went out for her date, but the CCTV footage never showed her returning to the hostel. This prompted the police to search for more footage from that night. Meanwhile, they looked through Grace's social media profiles and discovered an interesting comment on her Facebook photo from a man named Jesse Kempson. He wrote, "Beautiful, very radiant," right on the night she disappeared. The timing of this comment raised suspicions. The police checked Jesse's profile and found he was based in Auckland and appeared older than Grace. They wondered if he was someone she had met while backpacking or if he might be connected to her disappearance. Jesse Kempson, a 26-year-old man, was the last person seen with Grace Millane before her disappearance. Police believed he could help with their investigation, so on December 5th, they left him a message asking him to contact them. The next day, Kempson called back and said he had gone on a date with Grace on December 1st, but couldn't say more at the moment because he was at work. He agreed to come to the police station later that day. At the station, Kempson was very cooperative and willing to help. He patiently answered every question the police had, starting from when he and Grace first matched on Tinder. Police weren't too suspicious of him at this point, as he seemed genuine in his desire to assist with the investigation. First, let's break down how Tinder works for those who haven't used it before. On Tinder, you can only communicate with people if you've both swiped right on each other's profiles, indicating mutual interest. You get to see a few photos and a short bio about the person before deciding if you want to match with them. So, Grace and Jesse had both liked each other and started chatting. Jesse made the first move, sending Grace a message on December 1st saying, "Hey Grace, how are you? Any big plans for the weekend?" Grace replied, "Hey, I'm good thanks. It's actually my birthday tomorrow, but I have no plans." Jesse then said, "Oh, happy birthday for tomorrow. Any plans for this evening?" Grace simply responded with a laugh and a, "Thanks." In my opinion, Jesse was coming on a bit strong in those first messages, pushing to meet up right away. Grace didn't seem too enthusiastic in her replies. But Jesse persisted, asking again if she wanted to meet that night. Grace said she might be interested, and Jesse offered to buy her birthday drinks, saying it was his treat. He suggested meeting at Sky City, a big entertainment complex and casino in the heart of Auckland. Jesse Kempson and Grace Millane met at Sky City, a large entertainment complex in Auckland with many restaurants and bars to choose from. According to Kempson, they went to Andy's Burger Bar, where they had several drinks. Kempson said he chose this public location on purpose because he was worried about being catfished, people not being who they presented themselves as online. He wanted it to be a safe place with lots of people around. When Grace arrived, she matched her online profile, and they had a great night together. They had burgers and many cocktails at the bar before leaving around 9:40 p.m., both a bit tipsy. Kempson stated definitively that despite their enjoyable date, Grace did not invite him back to her place, nor did he invite her to his. There was no discussion of them spending the night together. The date ended with a kiss on the cheek, a hug, and a "Nice to meet you." However, Kempson admitted he was very interested in and attracted to Grace, and they had engaging conversations. After their date, Jesse told Grace to let him know if she was free the next day to meet up again. She agreed, and they parted ways. Jesse decided to keep the night going and walked to a nearby sports bar for more drinks. He claimed he never saw or heard from Grace again after that. Later, he returned to his hotel and continued drinking at the hotel bar. The next morning, Jesse tried to contact Grace through Tinder but was shocked to find that she had unmatched him. He felt confused and a bit offended, thinking they had a great time together. Jesse told the police he woke up around 9 or 10 a.m., still feeling hungover from the night before. He admitted he was so drunk that he didn't remember leaving the sports bar or getting back to his hotel. Despite his memory blackout, he felt confident in his answers to the police. During the interrogation, the police asked Jesse if he would voluntarily give his DNA for the investigation. He agreed, believing he hadn't done anything wrong. At this point, the police had no evidence to contradict his story, so they had no reason to doubt him. As Jesse sat in the interrogation room, he suddenly got up and knocked on the door that a police officer had just exited. When the officer came back, Jesse asked, "Am I being arrested for something I didn't do?" The officer reassured him, saying, "No, this is a missing persons investigation. You're not being arrested. We're just trying to find this missing 21-year-old girl." At that moment, Jesse seemed to have a mini breakdown. It was unclear whether he was genuinely worried about Grace or if he was more concerned for himself, realizing the seriousness of the situation. He must have thought, "Wow, this girl I went on a date with is now missing, and the police are questioning me. They must think I had something to do with this." This was just the beginning of Jesse's strange behavior. The police later discovered that he was unemployed at the time, even though he had told them he was a lawyer. He also claimed to another officer that he was the manager of Woolworths. It was odd that he gave two different stories about his job, and it seemed foolish to think they wouldn't find out the truth. However, this discrepancy didn't come to light until later during the court proceedings. At that moment, Jesse had given the police no reason to doubt him or question his intentions. Jesse Kempson was not just any man. He was a con artist who rarely held a job. Instead, he relied on money from others and social security checks to support his drinking habit. He had a serious problem with alcohol. Recently, he had lost a job as a call center salesman after his company discovered he was calling his own phone to make fake sales. At the time of Grace's disappearance, he was living in a hotel, even though he had been in Auckland for a while. It was strange for someone familiar with the area to be staying in a hotel, but it made sense when you realized he was unemployed and on social security. Renting an apartment could be tough for someone like him, as many landlords would not want to rent to someone without a steady income. So, it was easier for him to pay for a hotel room instead. Jesse's life was filled with lies. He had told different police officers that he was a lawyer and a manager at Woolworths. But those stories didn't match his reality. It didn't take long for the police to realize he was not being truthful. However, at that moment, they had no reason to doubt him, and he seemed eager to help with the investigation. Jesse Kempson was not just a liar. He was a master of deception. At this point, the police had no idea about his troubled past. They would later discover that he was addicted to dating apps and had a reputation among women for being dishonest. He often lied to impress them, claiming he had great jobs and even that his brother was a famous rugby player, which was completely untrue. Some of his lies were even stranger. He told one girl he had gang connections, which would scare most people away. He even went so far as to lie about having cancer when he didn't. Many women who met him through dating apps eventually ghosted him once they realized his odd behavior and constant lies. Jesse's life was filled with falsehoods. He had trouble keeping a job and often relied on social security checks to get by. He was known to drink a lot, which only added to his problems. Despite his charm, his past would soon catch up with him, and the truth about who he really was would start to unravel. Grace Millane had no idea about Jesse Kempson's troubled past. Tinder profiles only showed basic information and photos, and all Grace saw was a man she found attractive. However, the police were quickly catching on to Jesse's lies and would soon uncover cold, hard evidence against him. During the investigation, an officer returned to the room with a photo from CCTV footage taken on the morning after Grace's date, December 2nd, at 8:14 a.m. This was a big problem for Jesse because he had claimed he woke up around 9 a.m. in a drunken stupor. The footage showed him leaving his apartment alone, which contradicted his story. In the video, Jesse looked directly at the camera as he stepped into the elevator. He had been with Grace the night before, but now he was leaving by himself. After about 10 minutes, he returned to the elevator carrying a suitcase. The police knew that a suspect with a suitcase was never a good sign. When the police confronted Jesse with the photo, he was baffled and insisted he had woken up at 10 a.m. They pressed him about the suitcase, and he admitted it was his, even offering to bring it to the police station for them to check. He was eager to appear helpful and cooperative, but the police were beginning to see through his facade. Jesse told the police that he had bought the suitcase that morning because he planned to move out of the hotel and into a proper apartment. This meant he had to admit he wasn't in bed until around 9 or 10 a.m., contradicting his earlier claim. When the officer asked why he hadn't mentioned the suitcase before, Jesse calmly replied, "Oh yeah, now that you've shown me, I do remember going out and getting that suitcase." His story was clearly falling apart. How could he go from thinking he was still in bed at 10 a.m. to suddenly remembering he was out of the house by 8 a.m. buying a suitcase? The police were becoming increasingly suspicious of Jesse Kempson. All of his lies and the contradicting evidence made them think he might have been involved in Grace's disappearance. In a documentary about the case years later, the police admitted they knew he was lying even at that early stage. Jesse appeared comfortable and believable, which made it tricky for the police. They had to be careful not to show too much suspicion, fearing he might shut down or start spinning even more elaborate lies that would be hard to untangle. Looking at the timeline, the investigation was moving quickly. Grace was reported missing on December 5th, and Jesse came in for his first interview on December 6th. By then, the police had already begun to unravel his web of lies and were suspicious of him just 2 days into the investigation. On the third day of the investigation, police obtained a search warrant to examine Jesse Kempson's hotel room. This marked a significant moment in the case, showcasing excellent police work as they quickly moved to gather evidence. When the police entered the hotel room, there were no obvious signs of a crime, no bloodstains or hair clumps. However, they decided to use a chemical called luminol, which reveals traces of blood even after it has been cleaned. When they sprayed luminol in the room, they discovered footprints all over the carpet, indicating someone had walked through blood. There were also small blood splatters found on the fridge. Analysis confirmed that the blood was female DNA, suggesting it wasn't Jesse's. While they couldn't definitively say it was Grace's blood, it certainly raised suspicions. Just 2 days after his first interview, Jesse Kempson was arrested on suspicion of Grace Millane's murder. The police were becoming increasingly convinced of his involvement, especially after uncovering the evidence in his hotel room. At 6:10 p.m. on December 8th, Jesse Kempson was brought back to the police station for another interrogation, a week after Grace Millane had disappeared. Knowing the blood evidence found in his hotel room could not be ignored, Jesse finally admitted that Grace had come back to his hotel after their date, and that something had gone terribly wrong. He recounted their evening, starting from their time at Andy's Burger Bar, where they had drinks, and then moving on to a Mexican restaurant and a blues bar. CCTV footage confirmed they were affectionate, with Grace appearing happy and comfortable with him. She even texted a friend saying she clicked with him and promised to update her the next day. Tragically, that was the last time her friend heard from her. Jesse's story changed, admitting they had not parted ways after the bar as he initially claimed. Instead, they had shared a fun night together, full of laughter and intimacy. However, the police were left wondering what had happened after that joyful exchange. Jesse's admission came too late, and the evidence against him was mounting. The police were determined to uncover the truth about Grace's fate. According to Jesse Kempson, after he and Grace left the final bar, they were affectionate on the short walk back to his hotel. CCTV footage showed Grace holding his hand and smiling up at him, looking enamored. However, she had no idea she couldn't trust him. In the hotel room, they began kissing and things got steamy. Kempson claimed Grace brought up the book, 50 Shades of Grey, and expressed interest in the BDSM activities portrayed. They started having sex, which Kempson described as normal and placid at first. He then stated that Grace asked him to engage in bondage and biting. Kempson said he complied with her requests to bite her, but then stopped. This is where his story takes a dark turn, as Grace was never seen leaving the apartment alive. The CCTV footage showed the last recorded moments of 21-year-old Grace Millane's life as she entered the hotel room with Kempson. Tragically, she had no idea the horror that awaited her behind those closed doors. Kempson's account of what happened next would be the subject of intense scrutiny as the investigation unfolded. Jesse Kempson claimed that after Grace Millane and he returned to his hotel room, their intimate encounter escalated into more violent sexual activities. He stated that Grace expressed interest in exploring BDSM. According to him, she asked him to pin her arms down and to choke her, but it's important to note that his credibility was already in question due to his history of lying. While some people may engage in consensual choking as part of BDSM, it is crucial to understand the difference between consensual practices and violent strangulation. Consent is key in any sexual activity, and safe practices should always be established, such as using safe words or signals to ensure both parties feel secure. However, the reality is that choking during sex can be dangerous. It takes only a few minutes of sustained pressure to cause serious harm or death, and it is impossible to accidentally strangle someone during a sexual encounter without intent. In the context of Grace's case, Jesse's defense relied on the notion that their encounter was a consensual, rough sex scenario gone wrong. This argument has become increasingly controversial in legal settings, as it often shifts blame onto the victim and obscures the reality of violence against women. Ultimately, the court found through evidence and testimonies that Grace had been murdered, and Jesse's claims did not absolve him of responsibility for her tragic death. According to Jesse Kempson's account to the police, after engaging in the violent sexual activities, he and Grace finished having sex normally. He then got up and went into the shower, where he claims he fell asleep standing up due to his drunken state. When he woke up, it was still dark, so he dried off and went back to bed without turning on any lights or checking on Grace. Kempson initially thought Grace had left, but when he woke up the next morning, he realized she was lying on the floor with blood coming from her nose. He said he yelled at her, thinking she was just asleep, and shook her, but she didn't respond. At this point, he must have realized something was very wrong, as her body would likely have been cold or stiff if she had been there all night. Kempson told the police he panicked, fearing how bad it would look if authorities arrived and found an unresponsive, possibly dead woman in his hotel room. He said he was about to call emergency services but decided not to because of this concern. However, if Grace was still alive at that point, his inaction likely sealed her fate. It's highly unlikely that someone would fall asleep standing up in the shower, especially if they were still drunk. Kempson's story seems implausible, and his decision not to seek help for Grace raises serious questions about his involvement in her death. Jesse Kempson's decision not to call for an ambulance after discovering Grace Mill Lane unresponsive raises serious questions about his state of mind. If he genuinely believed she could still be alive, it would seem logical to seek help immediately. However, his actions suggested otherwise. As he recounted the events to the police, he became overwhelmed with emotion, needing to pause the interview to step outside for a moment. This was notable, as it was one of the few times he displayed any visible stress or panic throughout the investigation. In earlier interviews, he had been calm and collected. When he realized Grace was dead, he claimed he was in shock and couldn't comprehend the reality of having killed someone, albeit by accident. He wanted the police to believe that their encounter was simply rough sex that had gone wrong, and that Grace had somehow asked for it. Instead of calling for help, Jesse left his hotel room around 8 a.m., seemingly unfazed by the gravity of the situation. He appeared oddly calm for someone who had just discovered a dead body. He went to a store called The Warehouse, where he purchased a suitcase, and then returned to his apartment building. CCTV footage captured him coming back with the suitcase, further complicating his narrative and raising more suspicions about his involvement in Grace's tragic fate. While Jesse Kempson did not mention it during his interrogation, it was later revealed that the suitcase was not the only item he purchased that morning. While Grace lay dead in his hotel room, Jesse was busy buying cleaning supplies, including spray bottles, cleaning products, and bleach from a local supermarket. His intent was clear: to eliminate any evidence that Grace had ever been there. About 3 hours after leaving, Jesse returned to his hotel room in a rental car. He later confessed to the police that upon his return, he began the horrific task of contorting and stuffing Grace's lifeless body into the suitcase he had just bought. He described this experience as traumatic, claiming he vomited several times because it was so grotesque. He said that while he was manipulating her body into the suitcase, he kept repeating, "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." It's crucial to remember that Jesse had already been proven to be a liar multiple times throughout the investigation. Any sympathy one might feel for him should be set aside, as his actions and words were deeply suspect. Later that same day, in the evening, Jesse made another trip to the local supermarket, where he rented a carpet cleaning machine. He took it back to his hotel room and remained there for the rest of the night, further indicating his attempt to cover up the crime. The police were piecing together the disturbing timeline of events, and Jesse's actions were raising more red flags about his involvement in Grace's tragic death. Around 6 a.m. the next morning, Jesse Kempson was seen leaving his hotel room with 2 large suitcases, one of which contained the body of 21-year-old Grace Mill Lane. The contents of the other suitcase remain unclear, but it is suspected to have included cleaning supplies, as he had been shopping for those items earlier that morning. After loading the suitcases into his car, Jesse was captured on CCTV at a different store about 10 minutes later, where he purchased a spa. 3 hours later, he returned to his hotel room barefoot, which raised suspicions. It was likely that his shoes were covered in mud from whatever he had done during his absence. He appeared calm despite the circumstances, and he was seen in a different outfit, suggesting he had also had his clothes dry cleaned. This sequence of events painted a disturbing picture of Jesse's actions following Grace's death, further implicating him in her murder. The police were gathering crucial evidence as they worked to piece together the timeline and the extent of Jesse's involvement in the tragic incident. After Jesse Kempson was charged with the murder of Grace Mill Lane, further investigation revealed that he had been meticulously cleaning up the crime scene. CCTV footage showed him at a self-service car wash, cleaning mud off his rental car before returning it. Throughout this cleanup process, he appeared calm and collected, showing no signs of panic or stress despite the gravity of the situation. Ironically, while he had planned every detail of his actions, he failed to consider the extensive surveillance footage capturing his movements. Shortly after being charged, Jesse took police to the location where he had buried Grace's body in the Whitaker Ranges, approximately 32 kilometers from where she disappeared. He had hidden her body in a suitcase, believing he could dispose of it without being seen. Grace's remains were eventually recovered, providing crucial evidence against Jesse. Her body was flown back to the UK, allowing her family to lay her to rest on January 10, 2019. Jesse's actions displayed traits of a cold, calculated individual, as he attempted to cover his tracks and dispose of evidence. His demeanor during the investigation and trial further reinforced the perception that he was a sociopath, detached from the reality of his horrific crime. When Jesse Kempson returned to his hotel room, CCTV footage showed him carrying 2 suitcases again. This raised questions. If one suitcase contained Grace's body, where did the other one come from? It turned out that he had gone back to the same store and purchased an identical suitcase just 2 days after buying the first one. His plan was to appear as though he was returning with the same suitcase he had left with, hoping this would quell any suspicions. However, this only served to reinforce the perception that he was a sociopath. Jesse even offered to let the police search his new suitcase, claiming they wouldn't find anything. He believed that since it was brand new and had never been in the same room as Grace, it would clear him of suspicion. However, this tactic backfired spectacularly when the truth came to light. During his murder trial, Jesse pleaded not guilty, maintaining that Grace's death was a tragic accident and merely rough sex gone wrong. The jury heard the details of Grace's autopsy, which revealed 9 fresh bruises on her body from the night of her death, with a total of 12 bruises noted. While some of these were likely travel-related, 9 bruises were consistent with being pinned down and restrained. Most of the bruises were located on her arms, shoulders, and neck. The official cause of death was determined to be from prolonged pressure to the neck, further indicating that her death was not accidental. The evidence against Jesse was mounting, and the jury would have to consider the implications of his actions and the tragic loss of Grace Millane. The evidence presented in Grace Millane's case was overwhelmingly against Jesse Kempson. While some bruises on her arms might suggest consensual rough sex, the autopsy indicated that she had suffered prolonged pressure to her neck, requiring at least 5 minutes of sustained force. This was not a spur-of-the-moment accident. It was a calculated act of violence. Jesse's trial ignited a significant conversation about societal attitudes towards victims, particularly women. His defense relied on the controversial, rough sex argument, suggesting that Grace had consented to the actions that led to her death. This defense perpetuates a troubling narrative that allows men to manipulate women's sexual preferences to evade responsibility for heinous crimes. Jesse attempted to portray Grace as the dangerous one, implying that he was the victim in their encounter. Yet, he was the one who murdered her, then disposed of her body and evidence, all while maintaining a facade of innocence. His calm demeanor during police interviews starkly contrasted with the horrific reality of what he had done. The courtroom was filled with tension as Jesse's lawyers argued that Grace had an interest in BDSM and had asked him to choke her. However, the prosecution highlighted that no woman ever consents to being murdered, regardless of the context. Grace's tragic death and the subsequent trial highlighted the need for a societal shift in how we view consent and the treatment of female victims in the justice system. Ultimately, the jury rejected Jesse's defense, recognizing that his actions were not a result of consensual activity, but rather a brutal act of violence against a woman who deserved to feel safe. During the trial, it was revealed that Grace Millane had previously explored various fetishes and had met up with men through BDSM hookup apps. Her ex-boyfriend testified as a character witness, stating that they had engaged in BDSM activities before and had used safe words. However, it is crucial to emphasize that Grace's past sexual experiences and preferences do not justify Jesse's actions or absolve him of responsibility for her murder. The prosecution argued that consent is a continuous process, and if someone is incapacitated or unable to communicate, they cannot consent to any activity, including BDSM. Jesse's claims that Grace had consented to being choked were undermined by the fact that he applied pressure for an extended period, well beyond any reasonable limits of consensual activity. Many observers, including those following the case, found it hard to believe Jesse's narrative. There were doubts about whether they even engaged in sexual activity that night, given his history of deception. It was entirely possible that he had murdered Grace shortly after bringing her into the hotel room, rather than during consensual intimacy. If Jesse was willing to risk Grace's life by applying prolonged pressure to her neck, it indicated a profound disregard for her safety and autonomy. His actions were not just a tragic accident, they were a conscious choice to engage in violence against a woman who had trusted him. The trial highlighted the complexities of consent and the dangers of using past sexual behavior to justify violent actions, emphasizing that no one ever consents to being harmed or killed. Jesse Kempson's actions after murdering Grace Millane further illustrated his disturbing character. Contrary to his claim of having fallen asleep in the shower, it was revealed during the trial that he had been looking up violent and grotesque pornography, including scat porn, shortly after committing the crime. This behavior highlighted his lack of remorse and emotional disconnect from the horrific act he had just committed. His choice to engage with such disturbing material after murdering Grace suggested a troubling level of arousal and pleasure derived from the violence he inflicted. This raises serious questions about his mental state and intentions. Moreover, the defense's attempt to use Grace's past sexual preferences as a justification for his actions was deeply problematic. Regardless of her previous experiences or interests in BDSM, consent is an ongoing process, and there is no scenario in which someone consents to being murdered. Jesse's behavior and the evidence presented in court painted a clear picture of a man who acted with intent and disregard for Grace's life. The trial sparked a broader discussion about how society treats victims, particularly women, in cases of sexual violence. Jesse's defense relied on the notion that Grace's actions somehow invited his violence, a narrative rooted in sexism that allows perpetrators to evade accountability for their crimes. Ultimately, the evidence against him was overwhelming, and his attempts to manipulate the narrative only served to further expose his culpability in Grace's tragic death. According to the evidence presented at trial, Jesse Kempson took 7 intimate photos of Grace Millane's naked body after murdering her. This suggests he derived some form of sexual gratification from the crime and may have intended to use the photos as trophies if he had evaded detection. Kempson also searched for information about the Whitaker Ranges, where he ultimately buried Grace's body in a suitcase. This indicates he had likely planned the disposal of her remains in advance. Shockingly, on the same day he murdered Grace, which was her 22nd birthday, Kempson went on another Tinder date. The woman reported that he acted strangely and creepily, even mentioning he had spent the day looking for a large duffel bag, perhaps inadvertently revealing details about his recent crime. Kempson's actions after the murder, including searching for violent pornography, arranging another date, and taking intimate photos of Grace's corpse, paint a disturbing picture of a man who derived pleasure from his heinous act. The evidence presented at trial overwhelmingly contradicted his claim that Grace's death was an accident during consensual sex. During his date, Jesse Kempson made several unsettling comments that hinted at his recent crime without directly revealing anything. He claimed that many of his friends were police officers and mentioned that they were dealing with numerous dead bodies and missing hikers in the Whitaker Ranges. This was particularly alarming given the context of his actions. He also shared his knowledge about homicide investigations, stating that police dogs cannot detect buried bodies if they are more than 4 feet deep. This conversation took place on a first date, which is bizarre and inappropriate. It raised serious red flags about his mental state and intentions. Most people would find such topics disturbing, yet Jesse seemed unfazed. The woman he was with felt uncomfortable and tense around him, so much so that she lied about where her car was parked to avoid him walking her to it. This instinct to distance herself from him was justified, as shortly after their date, Jesse loaded Grace's corpse into his rental car and buried her body in the very area he had just discussed with his date. Jesse's behavior during this date showcased his complete lack of empathy and the chilling reality of his actions. While he was attempting to maintain a facade of normalcy, he was simultaneously engaged in the horrific act of disposing of a body. This juxtaposition highlighted the depths of his sociopathy and further underscored the severity of his crimes. Jesse Kempson was convicted of the murder of Grace Millane, receiving a life sentence with a minimum non-parole period of 17 years. His trial revealed a disturbing pattern of violence against women, as several victims came forward to share their experiences of abuse at his hands. One victim recounted a harrowing incident where Kempson raped her after she refused his advances. Another ex-girlfriend described a relationship filled with physical and emotional abuse, including threats with a knife and sexual violence. She noted that Kempson often exerted power and control, reminding her of his dominance during their time together. During the trial, it was revealed that after murdering Grace, Kempson took intimate photos of her body, which he may have intended to use as trophies. He also searched for locations to bury her body, demonstrating premeditation in his actions. Shockingly, on the same day as Grace's murder, he arranged a Tinder date, further highlighting his lack of remorse and emotional detachment. Kempson's defense attempted to frame Grace's death as a tragic accident during consensual rough sex, but the evidence contradicted this narrative. The jury found him guilty, rejecting his claims and recognizing the brutality of his actions. The case sparked significant discussions about the treatment of female victims and the dangers of using past sexual behavior to justify violence. Jesse Kempson was convicted of the murder of Grace Millane, and his trial led to significant legal changes regarding the use of the rough sex defense in England and Wales. The court ruled that such a defense could not be used to justify violent crimes, marking a crucial step in protecting victims of domestic and sexual violence. In memory of Grace, a charity named Love Grace was established, focusing on providing essential items for women in need. The charity accepts donations of handbags filled with toiletries and has an Amazon wishlist for specific items, making it easy for supporters to contribute. The case highlighted broader societal issues regarding how victims, particularly women, are treated in the legal system. It sparked conversations about consent, victim blaming, and the necessity for legislative reforms to ensure justice for victims of violence. The ongoing efforts to raise awareness and support for victims continue to honor Grace's memory and aim to prevent similar tragedies in the future.